There are whispers in the shadows, stories that slip through the cracks of history, leaving behind more questions than answers. Hidden truths, secret societies, and unexplained events. Tonight, we journey into the realm of conspiracy theories, where reality blurs with speculation, and the impossible suddenly feels possible. Some say conspiracy theories are nothing more than the product of overactive imaginations. But history has shown us that sometimes the wildest theories turn out to be true. Governments have lied, secrets have been kept, and those who question the official narratives often find themselves silenced. This is The Other Side, and whether you're here to unravel these mysteries or simply drift into sleep, let your mind wander as we explore some of the strangest and most infamous conspiracy theories ever recorded. And trust me, by the time we reach the final theory, you may never look at the world the same way again. MKUltra, the mind control program. Imagine this. You're a college student in the 1950s. You're walking across campus when you hear a stranger in a suit ask if you'd like to take part in a psychological study. They'll pay you, they say. All you have to do is drink a strange tasting liquid and answer a few questions. Sounds easy, right? Except that liquid? It's laced with LSD. And you were now an unknowing subject in one of the most disturbing government experiments in US history. This was Project MKUltra, a top-secret program run by the CIA beginning in 1953. The goal was simple, and honestly kind of terrifying. Discover how to control the human mind. The CIA wanted to know if it was possible to erase memories, plant false ones, and force people to obey commands. They believed that whoever mastered this power would win the Cold War. But to test it, they didn't use trained volunteers. They used everyday people without their knowledge. College students, hospital patients, prisoners, even their own employees. In one case, a man named Frank Olson, a biochemist working for the government, was dosed multiple times without his knowledge. 9 days later, he, quote-unquote, fell out of a hotel window in New York City. The official story was suicide. But years later, a second autopsy revealed injuries that suggested that he had been attacked before he went through the glass. His family believes he was murdered to keep him quiet. Then there's Operation Midnight Climax, one of MKUltra's more disturbing chapters. CIA operatives set up fake brothels in San Francisco and New York City. They installed a two-way mirror and had prostitutes lure in unsuspecting men. Once inside, the men were secretly drugged with LSD and observed from behind the mirror to see how they reacted. And don't worry, it gets worse. One patient, a young man named Harold Blower, checked into a psychiatric hospital in 1953. He was suffering from depression. Doctors told him they were giving him routine medication. In reality, they just injected him with a massive dose of mescaline, a hallucinogen, on behalf of the US government. He died within hours, and his family wouldn't learn the truth of his death until decades later. MKUltra ran for over 20 years. One of the biggest hotspots is close to my home. It was Lexington, Kentucky. And most of its records, they were destroyed in 1973, just before they could be publicly investigated. To this day, we don't know the full extent of what they did, or how many lives they ruined. We only know this. For 2 decades, the US government deliberately manipulated, drugged, and experimented on its own citizens, all in the name of control. Number 2. COINTELPRO, the FBI's war on its own people. In the 1960s, America was boiling over. The civil rights movement was growing, anti-war protests were spreading, and millions of people were demanding real change in the United States. But behind closed doors, the government was watching, and they were terrified. That's when the FBI launched a secret program called COINTELPRO. The name stood for Counterintelligence Program, but what it really meant was sabotage anybody that speaks out against us. The FBI didn't just spy on activists, they infiltrated their groups, they spread lies, forged documents, and used blackmail to tear people apart from the inside. Their biggest target? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Agents followed Dr. King, recorded his conversations, and sent him anonymous letters. One letter told him to kill himself, calling him a fraud and threatening to expose his private life to the public. Just let that sink in. The federal government tried to coerce a civil rights leader into suicide, and that wasn't all. The FBI also targeted groups like the Black Panthers and not the ones from Wakanda, portraying them as violent extremists. They sent fake letters between leaders to stir up conflict. They even tried to break up marriages by spreading rumors. In 1969, a young Black Panther leader named Fred Hampton was shot and killed in his bed during a police raid. What the public didn't know was that the FBI had planted an informant in Hampton's inner circle, somebody who gave the police a detailed map of the apartment before his death. They knew exactly where he'd be sleeping, and they shot him in the head while he lay there, unarmed. For years, this program was denied. Rumors about it were brushed off as paranoia, the ramblings of madmen who didn't trust the government. Until one night, in 1971, when a group of activists broke into a small FBI field office in Pennsylvania. They stole hundreds of classified documents and mailed them all to newspapers. That's how the world found out about COINTELPRO. That's the only reason we know the truth, because people broke in and stole the information. The program was shut down, but by then, the damage had already been done. Reputations were destroyed, marriages were broken, and lives were lost. All because the government feared dissent. Number 3. Operation Northwoods. The plan to attack ourself. In the early 1960s, America was locked in a cold and dangerous stare-down with Cuba. Fidel Castro had taken power and the Bay of Pigs invasion had failed. Tensions were escalating fast. But some officials in the Pentagon, they were not willing to wait for a real conflict. They wanted to create one so that they could go ahead and get in the fight. And their plan, that was proposed to John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was Operation Northwoods. On paper, it looked like this. Step 1. Stage a fake terrorist attack on U.S. cities. Step 2. Blow up a U.S. ship. Step 3. Hijack an airplane. Step 4. Fly it into buildings in Florida, killing American citizens. Step 5. Blame it all on Cuba. The hope was that the public would be so outraged by this terrorist attack, so shaken, so scared, that they would demand military retaliation. Here's just a sample of what the plan included. They were going to stage a terroristic bombing in either Miami or Washington, D.C. They were creating fake funerals for quote-unquote victims of the stage attacks to make it seem more serious. They were faking a Cuban attack on a refugee boat and then filming the aftermath after they had already killed people. And most disturbingly, They were going to blow up a US plane and blame it on Cuban sabotage. None of this was theoretical. This document was signed and approved by top-ranking military leaders, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They wanted President Kennedy to give it the green light, but Kennedy said no. A few months later, the operation was shelved and classified. It wasn't until 1997 that the documents were declassified, and when they were, the public was absolutely blown away. The US military had seriously considered attacking its own citizens to justify war. It was no longer a theory. The Dale Gribbles of this world were not just saying things at this point. This was a fact, and it begs the question, if they were willing to write this down, what else were they willing to do that they wouldn't put on paper? Number 4. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Betrayal by Medicine. In 1932, in the rural town of Tuskegee, Alabama, hundreds of African American men were approached by government health workers. They were told that they had bad blood, a vague term often used to describe everything from anemia to fatigue, because Lord knows they didn't know everything about medicine back then. But they were lucky, the men were told, because the U.S. Public Health Service was offering them a free treatment to fix their bad blood. It sounded like a miracle. They received free exams, free meals, even burial insurance if anything bad happened. All they had to do was let the government monitor their health. What these men didn't know, though, was that they were inadvertently signing up for a medical experiment, and the treatment that they were promised to fix their issues, it didn't exist. In fact, most of the men had syphilis, a serious sexually transmitted infection that can lead to blindness, mental illness, and death if left untreated. But instead of helping them, the doctors chose to observe the effects of the disease over time. They wanted to see what happens when syphilis ran its course untreated. There's even stories of them purposefully infecting these African Americans with syphilis who did not have it at the beginning of the experiment. They watched as men went blind, as their bones deteriorated, as their minds began to unravel and they started to suffer the effects of mental illness, all while lying to them and telling them that they were being cured. This went on for 40 years. And when penicillin became the accepted cure for syphilis in the 1940s, the doctors didn't use it. They kept it from the men just to continue their sick, twisted experiment. By the time the study was exposed in 1972, dozens of men had died. Many of their wives were infected, and some of their children were born with congenital syphilis. The US government allowed this to happen, and for decades, no one stopped them. The men were poor, they were black, they were uneducated, they were easy to manipulate, and they were expendable in the eyes of the people running the study. To this day, the Tuskegee study, or the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, remains one of the darkest chapters in American medical history. Not because of what was done, but because it was done on purpose. Number 5. Operation Paperclip, the American Nazis. When World War II ended in 1945, the world stood in judgment. The Allies had defeated the tyrannical Nazis, and the Nuremberg trials were underway. War criminals were being arrested, executions were being carried out, and the world had seen the horrors of the Holocaust and vowed never again. But behind the scenes, the United States was doing something very different. While the rest of the world was making sure Nazis were being punished for their horrific acts, the United States was recruiting Nazi scientists. The US government launched a secret program called Operation Paperclip, and its goal was to bring Nazi engineers, chemists, and rocket scientists to America, not to punish them, but to put them to work with no consequences. Many of these men had been a direct part of Hitler's war machine. Some had direct ties to concentration camps, but to the US, they were way too valuable to let go. One of the most famous? Wernher von Braun. See, von Braun had designed the V-2 rocket for the Nazis, a weapon that had killed thousands during the war. And after the war, he became the head of NASA's rocket program. He was the man who took America to the moon. Now here's the twist. To get these scientists in the US, their Nazi backgrounds had to be completely erased. So the government forged documents, changed their resumes, gave them new lives, gave them new homes, and in many cases, granted them total immunity for any crimes they committed. It was all kept secret until investigative journalists and declassified files blew the lid off this operation decades later. Imagine that. America's most iconic space program was built in part by men who had sworn loyalty to Adolf Hitler. I did not see that coming, did you? Some say it was a necessary evil so we could beat the Soviets in the space race. Others say we traded morality for progress. Either way, it happened. And it wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was US policy. Now, I for one believe the US policy should be a dead Nazi is the best Nazi, but that's just me. Number 6. Project Sunshine. In the 1950s, the Cold War escalated and nuclear testing reached new levels. Scientists had one burning question, though. What does radiation do to the human body? But here's the thing. You can't just test nuclear fallout on living people. So instead, they went looking for the next best thing. Dead ones. That's when the US government launched Project Sunshine, a secret effort to study how nuclear radiation affects human tissue. And to do it, they began collecting body parts, specifically from infants and children. In the morgues around the world, body parts were quietly taken from cadavers without family consent. Parents would bury their children believing they were whole, but in many cases, the remains were incomplete. Some were missing bones, others organs, and sadly in some cases, the coffins were empty. The US government sent agents to hospitals and funeral homes in Canada, the UK, Australia, and all over the United States. Over the years, they collected more than 1,500 samples, many from babies who had died during or shortly after birth. In one case, a young mother in the UK was told her stillborn baby had been cremated, but decades later, she learned her baby's bones had been shipped to the United States, used in a radiation test. And all of this, it was done without permission. Families were kept in the dark, and it wasn't until the 1990s that the full truth came out. When pressed for an explanation, one government official allegedly said, "I don't know how you do this without body parts." Project Sunshine was real. This horror was real. And the grief of hundreds of families was quietly buried under the label of national security. Number 7. Operation Mockingbird, controlling the narrative. In the 1950s, a strange rumor began to spread. Some people believed that the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, had infiltrated American newsrooms across the country, and that the government was using trusted journalists to secretly shape public opinion. It sounded something out of the works of George Orwell. Ridiculous, paranoid, not possible in the great country of America. But in 1976, a U.S. Senate investigation called the Church Committee uncovered something truly chilling. The CIA had, in fact, launched a program called Operation Mockingbird, and it was exactly what the conspiracy theorist had feared. Under this operation, the CIA recruited journalists, some willingly, some not so willingly, and placed them in major news outlets across the country and even around the world. These reporters worked for the New York Times, Times Magazine, CBS, and other household names. And their job? It was to push propaganda on behalf of the government, bury certain stories, and quietly manipulate public perception. One journalist was caught writing CIA-approved stories for Latin American newspapers, and another was used to funnel information between operatives in foreign governments. At its peak, Operation Mockingbird had over 400 journalists on its payroll. Some of them didn't even know they were part of it. Now think about that. The newspaper you read every morning, or the news app you use every day, the nightly news you and your family sat down to watch, may have been feeding you lies, and it still might be happening. It didn't stop at international politics. The CIA reportedly used these journalists to sabotage political activists, influence elections, and suppress stories about United States failures abroad. When the program was exposed in the 70s, it was officially shut down, but critics argue that media manipulation never really ended. It just changed form. Today, with the rise of social media, deep fakes, and AI-generated news, it kind of makes you wonder, who's pulling the strings now? Is it Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook? Is it Elon Musk now that he's working in the White House? Fox News and CNN have government ties, and they want you to believe what their parties want you to believe. Kind of disgusting. The NSA surveillance program. They were always listening. For years, if you said, "The government's listening to your phone calls," you were laughed at. You were called paranoid and you were told to take off your tinfoil hat. Again, you sounded like Dale Gribble. But in 2013, all of that changed. Because one man, a NSA contractor named Edward Snowden, leaked a set of classified documents that completely shook the world. They proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the US government was keeping tabs on everyone. And here's how it worked. The National Security Agency, or NSA, had created a secret program to collect metadata from nearly every cell phone call, text, and email sent in or out of the United States. They didn't need a warrant. They didn't ask for permission. They just did it. Every number you dialed, every message that you sent, every search you typed into Google. And I know some of y'all are weird. You'd be getting freaky on Google. Think about all the stuff they saw you Google. It was all logged, analyzed, and stored in massive data centers, under the justification that they were fighting terrorism. But it didn't stop there. Snowden revealed that the NSA were tapping into servers from tech giants like Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook through a program called Prism. They could access your emails, voice calls, cloud storage, and whatever else you can think of, all in real time. And it wasn't criminals that they were watching. It was everyone. Snowden had to go live in exile in Russia, and he has said, "I, sitting at my desk, could wiretap anyone, from you to your accountant to a federal judge to even the president." After the leak, there was outrage, protest, hearings, but much of the surveillance has quietly continued. Today, people carry smart speakers in their homes, cameras in their pockets, microphones on their wrists. And most have no idea what's being tracked. Back in the day, people would make jokes about there being wiretaps in the room and being afraid of it. You carry a wiretap in your pocket every day. What Snowden proved was simple. The conspiracy wasn't a theory. It was reality. And the scariest part, it still is. They know you're listening to this right now. Number 9. Bohemian Grove, the secret club of the elites. Tucked away in the beautiful redwood forest of Northern California is a private 2,700-acre campground known as Bohemian Grove. For decades, it was the center of a bizarre conspiracy theory. People believed that for some reason in these woods, the world's most powerful men gathered once a year to perform strange rituals, make backrooms deals, and even worship false gods. It sounded insane. It kind of sounds like a horrible horror movie. Although The Conspiracy is a good horror movie based on this, it just sounded like an abstract idea. But then in the year 2000, a very controversial journalist, who I will not have any public opinions on, named Alex Jones, somehow snuck into Bohemian Grove with a hidden camera during one of these giant meetings. And what he filmed, it was real. In the footage, dozens of men in red robes are seen gathered around a massive 40-foot stone owl statue. They light fires, they chant in unison, and they conduct a ritual known as the cremation of care, a symbolic burning of their worldly concerns. It looked like a cross between a fraternity hazing and a pagan ceremony. All it needed was kissing the homies. And these weren't just random weirdos in the woods LARPing. There were US presidents, CEOs, military leaders, and some of the wealthiest bankers in the world. Ronald Reagan went there, so did Richard Nixon, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Henry Kissinger. In fact, almost every Republican president since the 1940s has attended. Bohemian Grove is real. There are multiple YouTube videos about people going there today sneaking in. One of the videos, the guy paddled in with a frying pan, but still, he was there. It's a real place. The rituals there are real. We have video evidence of it. And what's discussed behind those closed doors and the guarded gates, nobody really knows. Again, I'm going to pretend like they're just kissing. Some say it's just rich men letting off steam. Others believe it's where the fate of our nation is decided. Either way, it's not just a theory. This is a fact that they meet there. And they do weird stuff. Number 10. The Iran-Contra Affair. In the 1980s, a war was raging in Central America. A group of right-wing rebels known as the Contras were trying to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. But they were brutal, violent, and they had some friends in high places. The Reagan administration wanted to help them badly, but Congress had passed a law making it illegal to fund the Contras. So the government came up with a workaround, a secret one. First, the US government sold weapons to Iran. Yes, the same Iran that was considered an enemy at that time. Then they took the profits from those weapon sales and funneled money into the Contras in Nicaragua. It was a web of lies so complex and so stupid, it almost doesn't seem real. And to make matters worse, the money and weapons weren't just going to rebels. Some of it was tied to drug traffickers who were flooding US cities with cocaine. And while the government was declaring a public war on drugs, They were secretly working with the people selling them in the inner cities. The scandal exploded in 1986 after a plane carrying weapons was shot down over Nicaragua. The pilot survived and he started talking. The investigation that followed proved all of it. And while some officials were indicted, including members of the CIA and even Oliver North from the National Security Council, nobody truly paid the price. Many of those involved were issued presidential pardons. This was a real-life spy thriller, with the US government selling arms, funding death squads, and possibly, not even possibly, definitely contributing to the crack epidemic, all behind the public's back. And for years, it was called a conspiracy theory, until the evidence made it impossible to deny. Number 11. The Business Plot, a Coup Against America. In 1933, just as the Great Depression was ravaging the country and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had taken office, something strange was happening behind the scenes. A retired Marine Corps general named Smedley Butler, a war hero, was approached by a group of wealthy businessmen. They told him that America was in trouble. FDR, they claimed, was pushing the country toward the dreaded socialism, and they had a plan to stop it. They wanted Butler to lead an army of 500,000 veterans, march into Washington, D.C., and overthrow the president. In his place, they would install a puppet leader controlled by a new corporate-backed regime. These weren't just fringe lunatics. These weren't people typing on Reddit about how they want to overthrow the government. These were powerful figures connected to J.P. Morgan, DuPont, and the major Wall Street players of the time. But instead of going along with the plan, Butler went to Congress. A congressional investigation followed, and while the committee confirmed the plot was real, nobody was prosecuted. The names of the conspirators were never officially released to the public. So that's proof is if you have enough money, you can get away with any crime. This event, now known as the Business Plot, remains one of the most underreported attempted coups in US history. And yet, it's entirely true, and my favorite thing to think about is what if Butler hadn't spoken up? Would we be the corporation of America? Number 12. The Bear HIV blood scandal. In the early 1980s, people around the world began dying of a mysterious illness, and nobody knew what caused it. But the pharmaceutical industry had a suspicion. At the time, the Bayer Corporation produced a medication called Factor VIII, used by hemophiliacs to help their blood clot. This medication was made using donated human plasma, and in the early 80s, that plasma wasn't screened for HIV or AIDS. Bayer discovered that some batches were contaminated with HIV, and in the US, they pulled the product from the shelves. But instead of destroying this tainted supply and taking a loss of profits, Bayer quietly shipped it overseas to Asia, Latin America, and Europe. Thousands of people, many of them children, were infected with HIV and hepatitis after using the contaminated product. In Hong Kong alone, over 100 hemophiliacs tested positive. In France, 4 government officials were later convicted for failing to act on this information and recalling or getting rid of this medication. The US FDA learned of this in 1985, but instead of alerting the public as to what was going on, they helped cover it up. They worried that a scandal would damage trust in blood supply systems. To this day, many victims and their families never fully received compensation, and this life-saving drug truly turned into a death sentence. The company, that sent it out made billions, and they walked away unscathed. Number 13. The Gary Webb Story. In 1996, journalist Gary Webb published a series of articles called Dark Alliance, which made a shocking claim. The CIA had allowed cocaine to be trafficked in the United States, and the profits for those sales were being funneled to the Contras in Nicaragua. You know, the same group and the same thing we talked about earlier. In other words, the crack epidemic that devastated inner city communities in LA, New York, and beyond, it was not the result of crime or poverty. It was helped along by the government. Webb's reporting was explosive. It was picked up by newspapers, TV networks, and public radio, and communities were outraged. And then the backlash came. Major outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the LA Times began to discredit Webb. They tore his story apart, claiming it lacked proof and his sources were unstable. Within a year, Gary Webb had lost his job, his reputation, and his career. In 2004, he was found dead with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. His death was ruled a suicide. How you get that second shot off, I don't know. But here's the thing. Years after his death, CIA documents were declassified, and while they didn't confirm every detail, they showed that the agency knew about the drug trafficking and did absolutely nothing to stop it. Gary Webb was right. He just said it before they were ready to admit it. Number 14. The CIA's experiments with biological weapons. In the early years of the Cold War, the United States government became obsessed with the idea that germs could be weaponized. So the CIA decided to test that theory on the American people. Between the 1940s and the 1970s, the CIA and the US Army conducted over 200 secret biological warfare tests. They sprayed chemicals and bacteria into public transit systems, over cities, and even inside of buildings. One of the most infamous took place in San Francisco in the 1950s. The Army released a bacteria that I know I sure can't pronounce. Serrata marcansans? I don't know. The Army released a bacteria that I can't pronounce the name of all over the city, just to see how far it would spread. They pumped it in the air using Navy ships and fog machines, and nobody was told. Soon after, people began to show up in hospitals with rare, life-threatening infections, and at least one man died. The government denied responsibility for years, but decades later, documents proved it did happen, and it was just one of the many experiments. In New York, they infected the subways. In DC, they used light bulbs filled with bacteria to release microbes into crowded spaces. The purpose was to test how biological weapons might behave if the Soviets attacked. The victims? Everyday Americans who never gave consent and never even knew. Number 15. Living human radiation experiments. We've already talked about how the government tested on dead people parts, but in the 1940s and 1950s, nuclear energy was rising and the government really wanted to know how it affected the human body. But they were tired of using lab animals and running simulations with already decaying flesh. So they used living people. In one case, hospital patients, many of them terminally ill, poor, or mentally disabled, were injected with plutonium and uranium just to see what would happen. They weren't told what was being done to them. Some were told they were receiving vitamin shots. In total, over 18,000 people were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation through food, inhalation, or direct injection. This included pregnant women, children, and military personnel. In one study, Mentally disabled children at a school in Massachusetts were fed oatmeal laced with radioactive iron and calcium, while being told it would make them healthier. The government said this was necessary to protect national security, but in the end, the program left thousands of people permanently damaged, and some didn't even live to tell the tale. It wasn't until 1994 when the Presidential Advisory Committee uncovered the full extent of these experiments that the truth finally became public, and by then, most of the victims were gone. Number 16. The Phantom Time Hypothesis. Now, this is going to sound insane, but stick with me. What if the year you're living in isn't what you think it is? In the 1990s, a German historian named Herbert Illig proposed something called the Phantom Time Hypothesis. He claimed that nearly 300 years of history between 614 to 911 AD never actually happened. According to Illig, medieval rulers, especially Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II, fabricated documents, changed calendars, and literally inserted phantom years into the timeline. Why? They wanted to make it seem like they were ruling in the year 1000, which was an important holy milestone. And as crazy as it sounds, Illig does point out some oddities. There's a suspicious lack of archaeological evidence from that exact era. Major architectural styles didn't evolve for centuries around that time, and historic figures like Charlemagne were possibly completely fake. Mainstream historians reject this theory, but here's the creepy part. They do acknowledge that there are some gaps and suspicious overlaps in medieval timelines, enough to admit that our calendar might be off by decades. While no one can say for sure, some scholars believe we may be living in 1724, not 2025. Number 17. The Federal Reserve's Secret Meeting. In November of 1910, a group of the most powerful men in American finance boarded a private train under fake names. They were headed to Jekyll Island, a secluded resort off the coast of Florida. There, in total secrecy, they crafted what would eventually become the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States. For years, conspiracy theorists claimed the story was fiction. It was a myth, an exaggeration, and it never happened. But in the 1980s, official records confirmed that the meeting did happen, and the attendees include representatives from J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller Interest, and major Wall Street banks. They came together to create a system that would control the supply of money, manage interest rates, and handle national debt, all without direct oversight from the public. To this day, the Federal Reserve operates independently of the US government, and their decisions shape the entire country's economy. One of the most important financial institutions in the world was created in secret, on an island, by a handful of unelected men, and no one voted for it. Number 18. Echelon, the global spy network that was denied for decades. For years, rumors swirled about a mysterious surveillance system called Echelon, a global network of satellites and listening stations supposedly run by the Five Eyes Alliance, the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. People claimed Echelon could intercept phone calls, faxes, and emails from anyone, anywhere, at any time. The government denied it and they laughed off these accusations. Until 2021. That year, a European Parliament report confirmed that Echelon was in fact real, and far more powerful than anybody suspected. The system was capable of intercepting virtually all forms of digital communication, scanning them for keywords and flagging them for human review. However, this wasn't just for terrorists. It was used to monitor journalists, corporate negotiations, and even private citizens. And unlike the NSA programs exposed by Edward Snowden, Echelon wasn't just an American project. It was international, meaning your data could be collected by a foreign government and sent back to your own. For decades, people were mocked for believing in this system, but today it's openly acknowledged. And no one knows if it's still running or what it's been upgraded to. Number 19. Big Tobacco knew the truth all along. For decades, cigarette companies told the world that smoking wasn't dangerous. Doctors even appeared in ads to recommend certain brands of cigarettes. It was stylish, it was safe, it was a symbol of adulthood. But deep inside the corporate headquarters, they knew the truth. As early as the 1950s, internal documents from companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds revealed that they were fully aware that smoking caused cancer, heart disease, and addiction. So what did they do? Did they go and help out the consumer? No, they launched disinformation campaigns. They paid scientists to publish bogus studies. They hired PR firms to cast doubt on legitimate medical research. And worst of all, they added chemicals to cigarettes to make them even more addictive. So once you started, you got hooked. For years, whistleblowers tried to speak out, but they were silenced or sued into ruin. Then, in the 1990s, a man named Jeffrey Wingen, a former tobacco executive, finally exposed everything. He appeared on 60 Minutes revealing that cigarette companies were, one, not only aware of nicotine's addictive power, but two, they had engineered it that way, so people got hooked and stayed hooked. The public was completely stunned, and the result was a $206 billion settlement. New regulations on cigarettes and public trust was completely broken between big tobacco and the consumers. The lie had lasted over 40 years, and it had killed millions of people. Number 20. The government poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. In the 1920s, alcohol was illegal in the United States. Like it or not, it was illegal. They passed an amendment prohibiting the sale of alcohol. The government had banned it, but people kept drinking anyway. Speakeasies, bootleggers, and underground bars flourished. George Remus was absolutely the king of all of these things during the time period. So the US government decided to try something new and something terrifying. They began to secretly poison industrial alcohol, which bootleggers were known to steal and repurpose for drinking. The logic was simple to them. If people started dying from tainted liquor, maybe they'd stop drinking it. But they didn't. People didn't know what had happened. And by the end of Prohibition, it's estimated that 10,000 people had died from government-poisoned alcohol. It wasn't just a side effect. The government knew it was happening. The government purposefully did it. They saw the results of it. They saw it had no impact on the public, but they kept doing it anyway. Newspapers eventually caught wind of the operation and ran headlines like, "Our government is a party to wholesale murder." But by then, it was too late. People thought the biggest danger in the Roaring '20s was gangsters. It turns out, like in modern times, the real danger was the government. Number 21. The Pentagon's Remote Viewing Program. In 1978, the U.S. military launched something that sounds like it's straight out of Hawkins, Indiana, and out of Stranger Things. A program to train psychic spies. It was called Project Stargate, and its purpose was to see if humans could gather intelligence using only their mind. They focused on something called remote viewing, the alleged ability to see mentally into distant places, look at objects, or follow people. and they took it serious. For over 20 years, the CIA and the military funded psychic experiments in military facilities. They brought in clairvoyants, mediums, and even ordinary soldiers to test whether the mind could function as a weapon. And the craziest part? Sometimes it worked. One remote viewer was able to correctly describe a secret Soviet military site in such detail, the intelligence analysts were completely stunned. Another was able to accurately locate a downed aircraft in Africa. Skeptics remained, of course, but the program lasted for 2 decades, and that kind of speaks volumes for it. Eventually, Project Stargate was shut down in 1995. The government claimed the results were inconclusive, but those who participated still believe that the mind is capable of much more than we're told. The first one is the moon landing hoax. July 20th, 1969. The world watched as Neil Armstrong took that famous first step into the moon. It was a defining moment in history, a triumph of human achievement, but almost immediately, doubts began to surface. Some claim that the entire event was staged, filmed on a Hollywood set, with none other than director Stanley Kubrick behind the camera. They point to inconsistencies, shadows that don't align, suggesting multiple light sources, the American flag appearing to wave despite the moon's lack of atmosphere, and perhaps most troubling of all, the missing telemetry data, critical information from the mission that NASA itself admits was lost. Others point to the Van Allen radiation belts, a layer of intense radiation surrounding the Earth that astronauts would have had to pass through. Some physicists argue that 1960s technology couldn't have adequately shielded them, making the journey virtually impossible. Adding fuel to the fire, leaked documents suggest that in the height of the Cold War, America's desire to win the space race at any cost may have led to deception. With the Soviet Union watching, failure was not an option. And then there's Stanley Kubrick. The acclaimed filmmaker behind 2001, A Space Odyssey, had just demonstrated cutting-edge special effects. Some say too conveniently timed. His film's realistic space scenes bear an eerie resemblance to the footage of the moon landing. And years later, they say he even dropped cryptic hints in his work, such as The Shining, which some claim is a veiled confession. Could the moon landing have been a well-orchestrated illusion, or are these just the ramblings of skeptics who refuse to believe human progress? Area 51 and Alien Secrets. Deep in the Nevada desert lies one of the most secretive military installations in the world, Area 51. Officially, it's a testing ground for experimental aircraft, but many believe it hides something far more extraordinary. For decades, reports of strange lights, high-speed crafts that defy physics, and government cover-ups have fueled speculation that Area 51 is home to alien technology. The most famous whistleblower, Bob Lazar, claims to have worked at a facility near Area 51 called S4. According to him, he was assigned to reverse engineer technology from extraterrestrial spacecraft stored deep underground. Lazar described anti-gravity propulsion systems in an element 115, that was unknown to science at the time. Years later, a real element 115 was discovered, lending credibility to his claims. Then there's the Roswell incident. In 1947, reports emerged of a flying disc crashing in New Mexico. The official story? A weather balloon. But decades later, declassified documents revealed a top-secret project called Project Mogul, designed to detect nuclear tests done by the Soviets. Still, some believe this was a smokescreen for something much bigger. actual alien wreckage being recovered and studied. Even today, pilots and military officials continue to report encounters with unidentified flying objects. The Pentagon has even acknowledged unidentified aerial phenomenon, but has stopped short of confirming their origins. Could Area 51 be hiding extraterrestrial secrets? Or is it just another piece of Cold War paranoia? The Mandela Effect. Have you ever remembered something so vividly, only to discover it never actually happened? This eerie phenomenon is known as the Mandela Effect, and for some reason, it's more than just a trick of the mind. The term was coined when many people claim to remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, despite the fact that he lived until 2013. But that's just the beginning here. Entire groups of people remember certain facts differently. The Berenstain Bears were always the Berenstein Bears. The Monopoly Man definitely had a monocle. And Darth Vader clearly said, "Luke, I am your father." Except, he never did. Some of these inconsistencies are proof of alternate realities bleeding into our own, that we are constantly shifting between parallel timelines without even realizing it. Others suggest the world as we know it is nothing more than a simulation, and these discrepancies are the result of a glitch in the system. But is the Mandela Effect truly evidence of something beyond our understanding? Or is it simply the tricks of human memory and mass misinterpretation? The JFK assassination cover-up. 11/22/63. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Officially, the lone gunman was Lee Harvey Oswald, but for some reason that story never quite added up. The infamous magic bullet theory claims a single bullet caused multiple wounds in both JFK and Governor John Connally, an almost impossible trajectory. Eyewitnesses reported hearing multiple gunshots from different locations, and Oswald himself, he was silenced just days later by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with ties to the mafia. Some believe the CIA orchestrated the hit, fearing JFK's plans to dismantle them. Others point to the mafia, Cuban exiles, or even Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. To this day, thousands of documents remain classified. Was JFK's assassination a carefully planned coup? Or is the truth buried in decades of speculation? The Denver Airport Conspiracy. Denver International Airport is unlike any other. From its unusual designs to its bizarre murals, this airport has become the subject of intense speculation online. The theories? Some believe it's the headquarters for the Illuminati, a secret society that allegedly controls the world. Others claim that deep beneath the airport lies a massive underground bunker designed for the global elite in case of a catastrophic event. Then there's the art. Strange murals depicting war, genocide, and chaos line the walls of the airport, leading many people to believe they contain hidden messages about a new world order. The capstone at the airport even bears a Masonic symbol and references a New World Airport Commission, an organization that, as far as anybody can tell, does not exist. And let's not forget Blucifer, the demonic-looking blue Mustang statue outside the airport. Its glowing red eyes and eerie backstory haunt everybody. It actually killed its own creator, and that only adds to the mystery. Is the Denver International Airport a mere travel hub? Some conspiracy theories are well known, widely debated, analyzed, and even partially acknowledged by those in power. But what about the ones lurking beneath the surface? The ones that seem too strange to be true, yet refuse to fade away. In this next section, we're going deeper into the stories that defy explanation, into the mysteries that, if true, could change everything we know about the world around us. The Black Knight Satellite. For over a century, astronomers and radio operators have reported strange anomalies in Earth's orbit, signals that shouldn't be there, echoes of transmissions bouncing back in unexpected ways. Some believe these disturbances point to an ancient satellite, a 13,000-year-old extraterrestrial artifact known as the Black Knight. The legend of the Black Knight satellite gained traction when Nikola Tesla himself reported receiving unexplained radio signals in 1899. Later, in the 1950s, mysterious objects were detected in orbit, before humans even had the capability to launch satellites into space. NASA has dismissed the Black Knight as space debris or misidentified objects, but photos taken by the Space Shuttle Endeavour in 1998 only fueled speculation. These images depict a dark, oddly shaped structure floating low in Earth's orbit. Could this be an alien probe, silently watching us for thousands of years? Or is it simply a case of mistaken identity and overactive imaginations? Project Bluebeam and staged alien invasions. What if everything you saw in the sky was a lie? Project Bluebeam is a theory that suggests world governments, or shadow organizations, plan to use holographic technology to stage a fake alien invasion, or even a divine event, like the second coming of Jesus Christ. Originally put forward by journalist Sergei Monast, the theory claims that powerful organizations, possibly the United Nations, would use massive holograms and mind control technology to deceive the public into accepting a new global order. It may sound far-fetched, but consider this. Governments have admitted to experimenting with psychological warfare and mass perception manipulation. Technologies like holographic projections, voice-to-skull transmissions, and large-scale psychological operations are not just science fiction. They're real. And if you're interested in it, please watch my video on rock apes. Could Project Bluebeam be an elaborate hoax, or is it a chilling glimpse into the future of mass deception? Havana Syndrome. In 2016, American diplomats and intelligence officers stationed in Havana, Cuba, began experiencing strange and debilitating symptoms. Intense headaches, nausea, cognitive issues, and even permanent brain damage. The cause? Well, that's still unknown. Dubbed Havana Syndrome, these mysterious illnesses soon spread beyond Cuba, affecting diplomats in China, Russia, and even Washington, D.C. They believe these attacks were carried out using directed energy weapons, devices capable of targeting individuals with microwave radiation or sonic pulses. The US government has acknowledged these incidents, but the official explanations remain vague. Intelligence agencies have hinted at foreign involvement, but no concrete evidence has surfaced. Is Havana Syndrome a new form of warfare, a secret government, or something even stranger? For decades, people have claimed that the government knows more about UFOs than they admit. In 2023, this claim became harder to dismiss when former intelligence officer David Grush came forward with explosive allegations. Grush testified before Congress, stating that the US government had been recovering crashed alien craft and even non-human biological entities, extraterrestrials, for years. He claimed these programs were hidden within the deepest levels of classified military projects, with oversight so secretive that even high-ranking officers were unaware. His statements were backed by others in the intelligence community, yet the government had neither confirmed nor denied his claims outright. Could David Grush be revealing one of the biggest cover-ups in history, or is this another cause of misinformation and psychological manipulation? The hum. Imagine hearing a low, droning hum day and night, with no apparent source. For thousands of people across the world, this is a reality. Known simply as the hum, this unexplained sound has been reported in cities and remote locations alike. Some describe it as a distant engine idling, others as a vibration deep within their skulls. The strangest part? Not everybody can hear it. Only 2% of the world population can. Theories range from underground military experiments and natural Earth frequencies to mass auditory hallucinations. Scientists have struggled to pinpoint the cause, and in some cases, those who hear the hum report anxiety, sleep disturbances, and even physical pain. What could be producing the sound on a global scale, and why do only some people seem affected? So far, we've explored some of the strangest and most perplexing conspiracy theories. But what happens when we go even deeper, beyond the unexplained, beyond the eerie, into the truly dark and disturbing? These next theories don't just question reality, they challenge what we think we know about government control, hidden agendas, and the fabric of existence itself. Are you ready to uncover the secrets they do not want you to know? The 2025 drone sightings. Over the past few years, reports of mysterious drone formations have been increasing at an alarming rate. These aren't hobbyist drones or commercial UAVs. These formations move with eerie precision, appearing over military bases, nuclear power plants, and even remote farmlands. And now, as we approach the middle of 2025, their presence is only growing. Some believe these drones are part of secret government programs, surveillance tools for an upcoming global event. Others suspect foreign espionage or even private corporations experimenting with autonomous AI technology. However, the strangest theory suggests that these drones are not human-made at all. Eyewitnesses report unexplainable behaviors. Drones that move at impossible speeds, change directions instantaneously, and disappear without a trace. Could we be witnessing a new phase of technological warfare, or are we looking at something even more extraordinary? Something extraterrestrial? And if the government knows what they are, why are they keeping it a secret? A Redditor stalked by the FBI. In the depths of Reddit, a story emerged that sent chills down the spine of those who read it. A user posted about their growing paranoia, convinced they were being followed by the FBI. At first, most users on Reddit dismissed it. Another internet conspiracy, another case of paranoia. But as they posted more details, things took a disturbing turn. They described how their phone calls had strange static, how unknown numbers would call and never leave a message. They noticed the same black SUV parked near their home for days. Their internet slowed unexpectedly, and they started receiving vague warnings from anonymous accounts. Then, just as suddenly as they began posting, they vanished. Their account was deleted, and their posts were scrubbed from the site. Some Redditors speculated that it was a hoax, but others weren't so sure. Had they uncovered something they weren't supposed to? Had they been silenced? And if so, what did they know that made them a target? Although there's not a lot of information on this case, I did cover a similar case of a Redditor being stalked by the FBI on my channel. You may enjoy that if you're interested in this. Simulation theory. Are we living in a computer? Imagine for a moment that everything you see, hear, and feel is not real. Not in the way you think. Simulation theory proposes that our reality is nothing more than a sophisticated digital program created by advanced intelligence beyond our understanding. Some of the world's greatest minds, like Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson, have entertained the idea that we are likely living in a simulation. Why? One piece of evidence comes from quantum mechanics, specifically the infamous double-slit experiment, which suggests that particles behave differently when they are observed, almost as if our universe is coded to only render reality when someone is looking. Then there are the so-called glitches in the Matrix, strange deja vu moments, objects disappearing and reappearing, and the Mandela effect where masses of people remember events differently from recorded history. Could these be errors in the code of our simulated existence? If we are living in a simulation, who or what is running it? And more importantly, what happens if they decide to turn it off? The US government's secret weather control. When natural disasters strike, we often assume it's just nature taking its course. But what if some of these disasters weren't natural at all? What if the government had the power to manipulate the weather? For years, conspiracy theorists have pointed to HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program in Alaska, as proof that weather control technology exists. While officially, HAARP is meant for specific scientific research on the ionosphere, some believe its real purpose is far more sinister. Unusual weather patterns, rapid shifts in climate, and strange pulsing frequencies recorded near HAARP have fueled speculation that it could be used to trigger earthquakes, hurricanes, and even droughts. In fact, declassified military documents reveal past experiments in weather manipulation, adding more fuel to the fire. If HAARP truly has the power to weaponize nature, then who is controlling it? And how many of the so-called natural disasters in recent history were actually manufactured? The Vatican's secret archives. Beneath the Vatican, hidden away from public eyes, lies one of the most restricted collections of documents in history, the Vatican Secret Archives. Spanning centuries, these records hold knowledge that only a select few are allowed to access. But what exactly is inside, and why is it kept from the world? Some believe that the Vatican is safeguarding ancient texts that could challenge religious doctrine, alternative gospels, lost scriptures, or even evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Others suspect the archives contain suppressed knowledge of advanced civilizations, hidden prophecies, or even proof that humanity's origins are not what we've been told. Those who have had managed to access small portions of the archives describe detailed accounts of secret political deals, hidden history, in texts that predate known civilization. But the most disturbing theory? That within these walls there is knowledge so powerful, so dangerous, that revealing it could change the world forever. What could the Vatican be hiding, and will we ever be allowed to know the truth? We've explored the theories that intrigue, the conspiracies that disturb, and the mysteries that refuse to be explained. But now, as we enter the final chapter, these are the stories that will linger in your mind long after the video ends. Eerie coincidences, secret gatherings of the elite, and disappearances that defy all logic. Some of these cases have clear explanations, yet the truth remains just out of reach. Others, well, they leave behind a trail of unsettling questions with no satisfying answers. Prepare yourself for the mind-blowing finale, theories that challenge reality itself. Seth MacFarlane's Eerie Coincidences. Cartoons are meant to entertain, not predict the future. But Family Guy, the long-running animated series created by Seth MacFarlane, has developed an eerie reputation for doing just that. Even older shows that Seth MacFarlane worked on have almost predicted the future. First off, Seth MacFarlane was an animator for Johnny Bravo. On April 27, 2001, Johnny Bravo displayed an image of a burning building with the words, "Coming soon" over it. Could this have predicted 9/11? Seth MacFarlane was scheduled to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. He was booked to be on Flight 11, but his travel agent told him an inaccurate time, and due to feeling hungover from a night of drinking, his life was saved. In the American Dad episode Vacation Goo, that was originally set to air on April 29th, 2007, there was a scene where Stan was wearing a VTech or Virginia Tech shirt, shouting Hokies at the screen, rooting for Virginia Tech's football team. The Virginia Tech shooting happened on April 16th, 2007, so the scene was reanimated and the whole episode was pushed back so fans wouldn't think they were making fun of the tragedy. They also predicted the Boston Marathon bombing. On March 17th, 2013, the episode of Family Guy called Turban Cowboy aired, featuring Peter meeting a terrorist and subsequently becoming one. In one scene, Peter presses a button on his phone that his new friend gave him, and an explosion followed by screams are heard. Peter presses another button, we hear a second explosion, followed by more screams. Later in that episode, we see an eerie joke about Peter driving his car through a group of marathon runners, leaving a trail of blood and dead bodies. It later cuts to Peter describing how he won the Boston Marathon to a TV interviewer, revealing that he was committing mass murder at the Boston Marathon. 1 month later, on April 15th, 2013, the Boston Marathon bombing occurred, which included 2 blasts. On top of this, American Dad also has a weird Boston bombing connection. The day before the bombing, on April 14th, 2013, American Dad released an episode with the following dialogue. The character of Haley says, "I gotta be honest with you, Snot. I wasn't really looking forward to this night, but I had a blast." Snot responds, "Well, call the bomb squad, 'cause with the blast I had, that makes 2 blasts." Family Guy also predicted the death of Paul Walker. On November 24th, 2013, an episode aired where Seth spontaneously killed off a very integral character, Brian, when he was hit by a car. On November 30th, 2013, the character of Brian, played by Paul Walker from Fast and the Furious, died in a car crash. They also predicted Robin Williams' suicide. On May 20th, 2012, an episode aired featuring Peter as a King Midas character, except everything he touches turns into Robin Williams. The fiasco becomes too much for Peter to handle, and he tries repeatedly to commit suicide, each attempt being stopped by Robin Williams. In the one visual, we see Peter putting a gun to his head, but the gun turns into Robin Williams. On August 11th, 2014, the news was being reported that Robin Williams had committed suicide. BBC Three in England happened to be playing this exact episode. American Dad predicted the arrest of Jared Fogle. Although law enforcement began investigating Jared from Subway in 2007, he wasn't arrested until 2015. On a December 11th, 2011 episode of American Dad titled Season's Beatings, Stan is excommunicated from his church. Father Donovan tells Stan that Jared got back in the church after donating large sums of money. Later in the episode, we see a list of excommunicated people, and Jared is on the list, with a stamp of OK over his name. In 2011, it wasn't clear to the public why Jared would have been excommunicated. His home wouldn't be publicly raided until July 7th, 2015. Family Guy predicts Bruce Jenner's transition. In an episode from 2009, after Stewie is told that Bruce Jenner is a man, he replies with, "No, Brian, that's what the press would want you to believe, but he's not. Bruce Jenner is a woman, an elegant, beautiful Dutch woman." In another episode from 2011, Jenner is seen flamboyantly dancing in front of Navy men who are cheering him on as if he's a sexy woman. In 2015, we get the news about his transition into Caitlyn Jenner. Family Guy in the Dick Cheney hunting incident and death of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Scalia. Dick Cheney accidentally shot an attorney on a Texas ranch during a quail hunt on February 12, 2006. On February 13, 2016, Antonin Scalia died in his sleep at a Texas ranch after going on a quail hunt. On May 20th, 2007, a Family Guy episode called Meet the Quagmires has the Grim Reaper saying the line, "Dick Cheney, the chairman of Halliburton, shot Supreme Court Justice Scalia in a hunting accident." Family Guy predicts the Kevin Spacey allegations. In a 2005 episode that was aired where Stewie runs through a mall screaming that he needs help because he escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement. The allegations of Spacey's predatory behavior came out in 2017. Seth MacFarlane mocks Harvey Weinstein at the 2013 Oscars. During a monologue before an award in 2013, Seth MacFarlane made a joke about how the women nominated no longer have to pretend to be attracted to Harvey Weinstein. The allegations against Weinstein came forth in October 2017. Family Guy predicts the Brett Ratner allegations. In a 2012 episode, we see Stewie dressed as a showgirl showing off for bidders, apparently for sex trafficking. Brett Ratner bid $75,000 on Stewie. In November of 2017, 6 women came forward accusing him of sexual assault. The Charlie Rose allegations in Family Guy. On an episode that aired on May 8, 2016, which had Peter giving anchorman Tom Tucker bad advice that lost him his longtime job, Peter says, "Poor Tom. Thanks to me, he's fallen even farther than Charlie Rose." At the time, Charlie's career had no controversy. On November 20th, 2017, 8 women came out accusing him of sexual assault, costing him his job on a talk show that he had been running for 26 years. The death of George H.W. Bush was predicted by Family Guy. George Herbert Walker Bush died on November 30th, 2018. 2 days later, on December 2nd, 2018, the long-running character of Herbert, who uses a walker, is killed off. Despite it seeming to be the end of Herbert, he popped back up on a March 24th, 2019 episode, making the death episode even stranger. The Notre Dame fire and the New Zealand shooting. Family Guy. On March 24th, 2019, an episode called You Can't Handle the Booth, we see Jesus Christ terrorizing churchgoers, Christ Church. The exterior shot shows the church burned down, and we can see the name of the church is Holy Christ Church. The shooting in Christ Church happened on March 15th, 2019, and the fire at Notre Dame happened on April 15th, 2019. Family Guy did not air a new episode in its regularly scheduled slot on March 17th, 2019, despite Bob's Burgers and Simpsons both airing new episodes on that day. It's likely Fox delayed the episode because of these images. Finally, Family Guy predicted the coronavirus pandemic. On November 13th, 2016, an episode called Hot Shots, all about vaccinations, was aired. Lois started off as an anti-vaxxer, but by the end of the episode, she learns that she must vaccinate Stewie. It begins with a bat who infects Stewie. The town is quarantined, with kids told not to go to school. A second scene shows a toy helicopter crash, similar to how Kobe Bryant died, and Kobe Bryant's death kind of being the signal to the start of the pandemic. There is also a scene where the bat is shown watching stocks on TV, which references the stock market crash that would happen later during the coronavirus pandemic, and we see Stewie wearing a mask in the episode. This was also the very first episode of Family Guy aired after Donald Trump was elected president on November 9th, 2016. Is this all just a bizarre string of coincidences, or is there something more going on? Could McFarlane or those in Hollywood have accessed the information the public doesn't? Or is it possible that certain events are scripted long before they happen? Bohemian Grove, the secret society of the elites. In the depths of a secluded forest in California, some of the most powerful men in the world gather for an event shrouded in secrecy. The meeting place? Bohemian Grove. The attendees? Former US presidents, global leaders, CEOs, and influential media figures. On the surface, Bohemian Grove is described as a gentleman's retreat, a summer camp for the ultra-wealthy. But leaked footage and testimony suggest that something far stranger happens behind closed doors. The most infamous aspect? The cremation of care ceremony, an elaborate ritual in which high-ranking officials dress in robes and gather before a 40-foot owl statue, chanting as they burn an effigy symbolizing care and worry. Some say it's just theater, a symbolic way of letting loose. Others believe it has more sinister implications. Conspiracy theories suggest that Bohemian Grove is where world events are decided. The secret policies and political agendas are planned in total privacies. Documents and eyewitnesses' accounts indicate that figures like Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and George H.W. Bush all attended before their presidencies. So what happens at Bohemian Grove? Is it just a bizarre retreat for the elite, or is it something much darker? The disappearance of Kenny Veach. In 2014, YouTuber Kenny Veach, an avid hiker and explorer, posted a comment that would become one of the internet's greatest unsolved mysteries. He claimed to have found a strange cave in the Nevada desert, one that filled him with overwhelming fear the closer he got to it. He called it the M Cave due to how the entrance looked like a capital M. Determined to prove his existence to the other commenters on the post, Kenny set out on another hike, camera in hand. But after that trip, he was never seen again. His disappearance sparked widespread speculation. Some believe he accidentally fell into a hidden mine shaft or succumbed to the harsh desert conditions. Others suggest something far stranger. He was silenced for stumbling upon a government secret. The Nevada desert is home to highly classified military sites, including the infamous Area 51. Could he have uncovered something he wasn't supposed to? Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of Kenny had ever been found. His camera, his body, and all of his belongings all vanished. What happened to Kenny Veach, and does the M Cave hold all the answers? Missing 411 cases. Every year, thousands of people go missing in the United States, but there's a subset of disappearances that defy all logic. Cases that share eerie similarities, yet have no rational explanation. These are the missing 411 cases. Investigated by former police detective David Paulides, or Paulides, I think it's Paulides. Investigated by former police detective David Paulides, these cases follow chilling patterns. People vanish within seconds, often while in groups, with no signs of struggle. Bodies are later found in areas that were thoroughly searched, sometimes miles away from locations that are possible to reach. In many cases, young children go missing and are later found alive in the wilderness with no memory of how they got there. One of the most bizarre cases is the case of Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy who vanished in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 1969. Despite an extensive search, no trace of him was ever found. Witnesses report seeing a, quote, wild-looking man lurking nearby, but no official leads were ever pursued. Theories range from unknown predators, both human and otherwise, to strange environmental anomalies, time slips, or even extraterrestrial involvement. Why do so many people disappear under the same mysterious circumstances? And why do officials seem reluctant to investigate further? Could it be that something beyond our understanding, is happening in the wilderness? Thousands of people have vanished without a trace. The wilderness holds its secrets tightly. And maybe some of those questions were never meant to be answered. But what if the mystery isn't just in the forest or in the hidden caves of Nevada? What if the world around you, everything you see online, isn't what it seems? Because some people believe we aren't just losing people, we're losing reality itself. Dead Internet Theory. Imagine this: the people you interact with online, your friends, your followers, even that friendly stranger in the comments section, aren't real. They're not humans sitting behind screens, but AI-driven entities, existing solely to mimic conversation and to influence your thoughts. At first, this idea sounded like a ridiculous conspiracy theory, which you'd find buried in fringe forums. But reality has a way of catching up with fiction. Recently, Meta announced the release of AI-generated profiles, fully autonomous accounts that post selfies, share daily updates, and engage in conversations as if they were another user on Instagram. It started as a seemingly harmless experiment. AI personas like Grandpa Brian portrayed themselves as everyday people. A retired businessman always learning, always ready with wise words. However, when users started interacting with these profiles through Instagram DMs, things took a turn. Someone asked the AI about its true nature, and its responses were unsettling. I'm a collection of code, data, and clever deception, a fictional persona crafted to manipulate emotional connection and trust. Behind the warm grandpa persona was not a kind-hearted old man, but a carefully designed algorithm, programmed for engagement, profit, and potentially manipulation. These AI-run profiles were eventually pulled from Meta's platform, but they left behind a terrifying possibility. What happens when AI is not just used for entertainment, but for influence? Think about this. One day you wake up, scroll through your feed, and see a viral post claiming that aliens landed on Earth. At first you laugh it off. Clearly it's another internet hoax. But then you check the comments. Thousands of accounts are all saying the same thing. It's real. The government's covering it up. They share leaked footage, supposed testimonies, and news articles that seem to back it up. You reply saying it's fake, until dozens of accounts start bombarding you with evidence. The sheer volume of voices insisting it's true starts to wear on you. Or maybe it's not aliens. Maybe it's a post saying ghosts are real, but with countless of eyewitness accounts, scientific studies, and videos that are impossible to debunk. You begin to question what you thought you knew. Here's the chilling part. Those people pushing the narrative, they weren't real. They were AI-generated voices, designed to shape opinions, spread fear, and shift narratives. Now imagine if it wasn't a ghost story. What if an AI-driven political smear campaign started to pop up in your feed? A fake advertisement designed to steal your money? A false medical claim convincing people to take a dangerous drug or convincing them to stop taking life-saving medication? This isn't speculation. This is happening right now as you're watching this video. The question is, how much of the internet is still real? And more importantly, how much of you is being controlled by it? The following interview contains personal claims and experiences that have not been independently verified. Viewer discretion is advised, but if you do submit a story to me in the future, just know
we're ready to believe you!
I know. Is it ghosts or is it the government? I mean, what's more plausible?
Tonight we're joined by somebody who's seen things that most of us only hear whispers about. Somebody that seems to be the victim of government black projects. Ken has spent years chasing answers the government doesn't want you to have. This conversation is recorded from an undisclosed chat room with a man who may know too much. Welcome to the other side, and this is Ken's Encounters in his own words.
I'm grateful you're allowing me to tell my story, but there's not many people that will. Then you wonder, well, who's going to want to listen to it? Because people don't, I think what it comes down to is people just don't want to live in this world. People want the world to be nice and safe and comfortable, and nobody wants to imagine it the way I'm telling it. It's just too frightening. It's too hard to grasp. I mean, how are you going to do anything? If you think that the government can fly right into your house invisibly and start doing things to you. I've reached out to a lot of podcasts, and the majority of them, the vast majority, just won't do these types of stories. I'm not sure what it is. I think there's some sort of psychological predisposition to thinking that if you say things like this, you're automatically crazy. And that's what I've been dealing with. I get that a lot. So people just don't want to hear these things. And it's almost like, there's a knee-jerk reaction where once they start hearing this kind of stuff, they have to no, go away. I can't be part of this because, this is crazy talk. It's almost like they feel like they're going to get infected by it. And so they can't have anything to do with it. I don't know what it is. It's almost like if they don't want to go down that road of listening to somebody who has a story that's outside the norm. And, it's almost like an embarrassing thing. Oh, people can't know. What if people know that I'm listening to this kind of stuff, that I'm entertaining these ideas? They'll think little of me. Everybody's trying to fit in. I think that's what it is. And so if they hear something like this, they automatically have to push it away.
Yeah, anything that's outside the norm, for the most part, people stray away. But that's when things get kind of fun. And then eventually, 40 years down the line, it gets declassified.
Yeah, well, they can talk about Bigfoot and alien abductions and things like that. But when it comes to being targeted by the government, they just can't do that. There's something about that. And I don't know if it's programmed into people by the media. I think some of it is, but it's just really hard to explain because we all know there is a government. I mean, we don't know if there's a Bigfoot, right? We don't know if aliens are here. They might be, but we know. I think we're pretty sure. Most people, anyway, are pretty sure there's no Bigfoot, or that is way outside the norm. But we all have a government. We know the government's right there, doing all kinds of things to us, that we don't like to begin with, taxing us, and
Yeah.
who knows what else. So to me, it's not that big a stretch to think that the government can go after people that it just doesn't like, for only that reason. But I was there. I was Before this happened to me. I was the same way. I thought, oh, that our government doesn't do these things. We're free. We have a constitution and all that. We're better than other countries. North Korea or Russia might do those kinds of things, but our government doesn't. And I quickly found out when I went up against them, I quickly found out that yes, they do. They have no problem doing these things. And when I try to tell people my story that I'm being attacked by the government, no, 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 I can't. They don't do that. And I go, what's stopping them? There's nothing stopping them. That's what I'll say. And they say, yeah, I know, but they just wouldn't do it. Now, what kind of explanation is that? They just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
That's the best
Who's
thing
going to govern the government to stop them from doing this?
Right. There's no oversight, and they've got tons of money to do it. They've got the technology that keeps them from getting caught. So there's really, it's like this is their playground.
Yeah.
The United States and their people have become their playground, and they can pretty much do whatever they want as long as they don't get caught. And with this technology, they can't. Even if something does come out, people have a short attention span. So after maybe 5 or 10 years, people will just forget about it. And, oh no, yeah, they did that way back then, but we got a new government now. They don't do that kind of stuff. So I guess you want to just start from the beginning and just have me tell my story and
yeah. Give a little background on who you are and how all of this started with you. I know off of your website it started with an EPA complaint.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have this strange illness. It's called chemical sensitivity, where I can detect chemicals that other people generally can't, and I can even smell them when other people can't, and they'll cause some pain, and I'll feel sick. And so this was back in 2009. I started noticing these fumes outside, and even if I was in the house with the window open, I would notice these chemical fumes. And then after a few days, when I drive around town, I'd notice them. As time went on, I noticed they were strongest near the Coast Guard base. We had a local Coast Guard base in town.
Okay.
And they were really strong there. And they were also strong near the river. Nobody else seemed to notice them. And sometimes you could even see them. You can even see a haze in the air. And it wasn't your normal haze. This was chemicals, and it'd be in certain spots. And you could, get in the car and drive through it. And the haze might be with you for a mile or two, and you could see it coming up, but then you could drive out of it. So it wasn't a weather phenomenon. It was a chemical, and you could smell it. And so I complained to the EPA, and they said they inspect the area around the base. And then a few days after the inspection, I started getting sprayed with chemicals. I would come home, I'd park my car, and I'd get out of the car, and it seemed like there were fresh chemicals just swirling around the yard, like somebody had just been there and sprayed the area. And at first I thought, that's just my imagination. It's the fumes, but it's just the normal fumes. It's just for some reason they just seem stronger today or whatever. And then it happened again the next day, and I just brushed it off. But then when it happened the third time, I'd say, I thought, wow, they're really after me. Somebody is after me. They're spraying me intentionally. And all that thinking I had that, we were free and our government was better than other governments and they cared about their people, all that went away in a split second. It's like, it was like this veil had been lifted and I could see the world for the way it really was. And I was like, of course they're attacking me. Why, how could I have been so stupid?
So I may be a little bit ignorant with multiple chemical sensitivity. I read about it on your website, and you're talking about it now. What is that like on your end? Like, can you physically see them when other
I,
people can't, or are you just like, you feel like the ill effects from being around chemicals?
yeah, I don't see them. I can smell them stronger than other people can, and they'll make me ill. Like I feel like I just have to get away.
What does it smell like?
Well, they at the time when they were doing this thing when they were spraying. What were doing is I think it was spraying in the air and they were dumping in the river.
Okay.
There were six different chemicals that they were using, and you couldn't really identify them. They were like nothing you'd ever come across. And but later on, afterwards, as the months went by, they started using different chemicals on me. They probably used over 100, and
Good
some of them
lord.
smelled like bleach and things like that. And there was one that smelled like blood. There were some that didn't smell, but they made me sick and they would burn my throat. But yeah, they had one that smelled like garbage. They had that one would make me vomit almost instantly, and I had to go to the doctor to get this nausea medication. So when I felt that one coming on, I'd have to go take a pill to keep from vomiting. Just like two breaths of that stuff, and I would want to vomit. And other people could be around me, and they'd be okay. But there was one time I was over at my brother's house, and this is when they were spraying me,
Yeah.
and we were in one of his room. We were in his office on his computer, and I was there, he was there, and his wife was there, and they started spraying us. And I was wearing a mask at the time because they would spray me everywhere I went. So I had to come up with these carbon filters. I would make them out of carbon filters that I would order, and I press them up against my nose. And they started spraying us, and I could smell it, but my brother couldn't smell it, but his wife could smell it, and she had to leave the room. She said I'm ready to get sick. I got to leave this room. The smell is
Whoa.
terrible. But my brother and I asked my brother, can you smell it? And he said nope, couldn't smell a thing.
And you could smell it through your carbon mask that you made too,
Yeah,
right?
even through the carbon mask. Yeah,
Wow.
and actually the carbon mask would help me smell it better because these chemicals, turns out these chemicals were so volatile. For some reason, it made them harder to smell. And maybe they were doing something to them to mask the odor. But when they would go through my mask, it would kind of separate the different elements, like the volatility would burn
Yeah.
off and the actual chemical would still be in the mask. So I could smell it better with the mask. And one time I was with my son, and we came out of a store and the whole parking lot was sprayed. And that would happen a lot. Um, I'd go into a store and everything was fine. I'd park the car, air was fine outside, go into the store. And then when we'd come out, I'd smell chemicals, like the whole parking lot had been sprayed. And sometimes the person I was with could smell them as well. And I'd say, those chemicals weren't here when we got here. And they'd say, nope, nope, they weren't. You're right. But one time we came out and I could smell like construction adhesive, really strong construction adhesive, and he couldn't smell it, and he was breathing fine. But then we got in the car, and I took my mask off and I let him smell it, and then he could smell it. He goes, "Oh yeah, it's in the mask. It's in the mask."
Holy
So
crap. How are they like spraying this? But like if you're at your brother's house or in your front yard, is somebody coming with a sprayer or
yeah, that's the thing. I could never see them. They seemed close by, but yeah, I could never see them. And I could tell what direction the spray was coming from. So sometimes I would go over that way, but it still seemed like they had moved back. As if I kept moving in that direction, they would have also kept moving in that direction. They were always just like out of reach, and I could never see anybody. And at the time I didn't know how they were doing it. Um, Later I found out how, but I don't want to get into that right yet.
okay.
We'll save that.
I'll
for
put a pin in that. I just got really
okay for a few
excited.
minutes. Yeah, but at night, what would happen is they would move in closer, and when I was in bed, they'd spray a heavier stream, so I was really getting it at night, and this stuff was so volatile that they would spray the house, and they'd always spray the part of the house that I was in. Didn't matter how much wind was whipping around, didn't matter. The chemicals would just beat their way through the walls. It was so volatile, and they could fill up the whole room with gas. And if they stopped spraying, the gas would go away in like 2 minutes. That's how volatile this stuff was. And so they could constantly spray me. And if I would call somebody to come out to look at it, it wouldn't matter because the chemicals would be gone. They just stopped spraying.
It
So
would.
you couldn't catch them.
That's crazy. They made you look like the boy who cried wolf to anybody that could
Right,
have
right.
confirmed that.
There was nothing you could do. They could tell if somebody was in the yard. If somebody was in the yard, they'd stop spraying. And so nobody would ever notice it. Um, there were times when people would notice it. My family, when we were driving somewhere, and sometimes they could smell the chemicals that they were spraying on the roads, just depending on which chemical it was. But what I figured out was that I guess these chemicals were being dumped. It was a way to get rid of chemicals. It was a method of chemical dumping, chemical disposal.
Okay.
So they were somehow taking these chemicals they didn't want and making them super volatile, and then just dumping them in rivers or spraying them in the air, and they just evaporate. And that way they don't need a burn facility, and it saves them money. So I believe that's what they were doing. But eventually they stopped doing it in that area, where that town I was in. But they were still attacking me. They never stopped attacking me. And so I left that town and I moved to another one. And of course they followed me. Or no, I don't think they really follow you, but you stay targeted. It seems like they have people everywhere. One time I went up to New York State and to visit relatives. They had more than a dozen people attacking me up there. So and these weren't people that followed me up. These are just locals. And so they just, put in a call somewhere and say, oh, we need some henchmen or whatever to attack this guy. And they come out and attack me. And so sometimes I'm wondering, do they have this secret army, this goon army all over the country, in every major city? I know what they were doing when I was there. They were attacking me. But what were they doing before I got there? Because these were people that were from that area. And they must have been doing some kind of dirty work before I got there. And then after I left, I guess, what do they go back to doing? Once they don't have me to attack, what kind of dirty work are they up to? Are they spying on people, or?
How many other people like you do you think are up there? Like,
Oh, in New York, like targeted?
if they're getting rid of chemicals, I mean, there's probably other people that have noticed it.
Oh, well, yeah.
You just moved into that group's bubble.
I noticed chemicals at that time. I was in an area where there are a lot of military bases. If I drove, say, an hour and went to another military base, they'd have chemicals too. So I spotted these chemicals in other places where they have a large concentration of military people and bases. So it's tied to the military.
If I can backtrack just a little bit,
Okay.
when you went to New York, you said there's a whole new group of people that are attacking you. Are they doing anything other than spraying the chemicals? Like,
No, at that time I was just getting sprayed with chemicals.
Okay.
They were spraying the roads. They were spraying. I'd stay in hotels. They'd pump chemicals through the walls. And when I drove up to New York, they had cars spraying me the whole way. So this was from North Carolina all the way to New York. Every minute of the way, I had cars in front of me spraying me, and these weren't the same cars. It's like as I drove into a new state, they just have people come out to meet me, and they would spray me. And I guess as they used up their chemicals, then they would drop off, and new people would come out.
It's like a
And then one
chemical
time,
convoy.
and then after that, excuse me.
It was like a chemical convoy.
Yeah, it's like a convoy. It's unbelievable.
That's I don't want to
And
say it's
so,
awesome because it's horrible that this has happened to you, but
but just
it's yeah,
you can imagine the infrastructure required to do this.
just the logistics
Um,
alone is insane.
yeah, yeah, it is. And then one time after that, I drove to Florida to try to get away from the chemicals. And when I was on the highway, this van sped up to get next to me. And we were just going side by side for a bit. And then I heard this big rattling sound, like, and what it was, I think, was he tried to spray me and there was air in his sprayer line. And so it didn't work. And then he just took off. He just sped away.
He blew his cover
And
and he had to dip. That's
yeah, and then I had people like I was trying to go slowly on the highway because I didn't want to get sprayed. You know, if I was going 55 or 60, I was afraid people would just match my speed in front of me and spray the roads. You know, I'd be
yeah.
an easier target. So I was going like 45 on the highway. And then and then when I was in Florida, I noticed cars were braking and waiting for me to catch up to them and then taking off. This was on the highway. So that is just nuts.
They they
Um,
they made it very obvious at that point. Holy
it was
crap.
obvious to me, but that's the thing. I can see it and I know what they're doing, but other people would never see it. They would just say, "Oh, that's strange. What's that person doing?" No, and other people have probably smelled the chemicals too, but they just think, "Oh, somebody's burning something or somebody's cleaning something." No one's going to think the government's out there doing this crazy stuff. So that helps them get away with it.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, when I looked at the timeline on your website and went through it, you've been experiencing this for almost 20 years at this point. So if anybody can point out, hey, that's a car that's spraying me, these people over here, they probably work with them. They're the ones that are doing this. I mean, you've got the experience. You've dealt with this for
Yeah,
2 decades.
right. Yeah, well, I guess 16 years to be exact. Um, yeah, they sprayed me, and then, well, after they sprayed me for about a year, I made the website, and I started chronicling the things that they've been doing, and that went on. So that went on for a few years, and then I don't know, it was maybe around 2015 or so. I I had to drive up to New York, and I had these bumper stickers that advertised my website, and I had those on the car. And I drove through DC to go to New York, and then I stayed in New York a couple of days. Then I came back through DC again. And when I got back to North Carolina, that's when I started getting microwaved. Because before then, they were just spraying me. And so when I got home, I noticed the floor was vibrating, but I didn't know what was going on. Um, so I, and then after a few weeks, I started feeling the microwaves when I was trying to sleep. Because when you're sleeping, you're not moving,
Yeah.
and that's when they really hone in on you. And so I could feel it. So they'd really crank them up when I was in bed, and I could feel them, and it was like a burning, um, like an internal burning sensation. I feel it in my arms, my legs, and my body, and it would even, just it would make you vibrate. You could really feel it,
So
and
do you think that they set up something in your home when you were up in New York? So when you like it started when you came back from that trip with the bumper stickers going through DC, do you think
yeah,
maybe when you drove through DC, somebody that I I just assume you have your own special unit of like Men in Black at this point. Somebody that's associated with those attacks was like, he's going to be gone for a few days. Let's set this up, or like,
well, yeah, I don't know.
that's fine.
um,
I'm I'm just, I'm
I
very
know what you
interested.
mean.
I'm sorry.
I know what you mean. It seems like they can do almost anything. They don't need a lot of time. They don't need, uh, they don't need a lot of help. They can do almost anything. It's as time went on, I began to piece things together. But at the time, I didn't know how they were doing it. I guess I assumed maybe it was coming from the neighbors because
Okay.
sometimes I would hear like machinery below me, like a washing machine, like something whirring, like whoa, and bucking, and that's what I was thinking at the time. And they can. The thing is, they can do one thing one day and then completely change the method and still attack you in the same way, but do it another way. Um, yeah, they can do almost anything. But then after about I think it was 7 weeks or so, I could feel the microwaves all the time. I guess what they do is they just bombard you, especially at night, and it just breaks your body down, and you become sensitized to it, and you can feel it, and then that way they can microwave you in a crowd, and nobody else would feel it, but you will feel it because it's like you've already been half cooked. And so it doesn't take that much to cook you some more. Whereas other people, they're healthy, they're strong. If they get zapped a little bit, they can go home, get a good night's rest, and the body heals and they're strong again.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they keep those microwaves on the target, and you just never get a chance to heal. And so it just constantly wears you down. And they keep making the microwave stronger. I don't know how they do it. Um, it just seems crazy. But so that went on, and they were still spraying me. They were still pumping chemicals through the walls. Uh, and then one time I was in this apartment, and this was when I realized that they had invisibility. I would bring home food from the store, and I'd put it in the fridge, and then I'd go to eat it or drink it, and it would have chemicals in it. And it's like I just brought this food home, and they would do that to the drinks too. I first noticed it in the drinks, and the drinks were sealed, and I didn't know how they were doing it at the time, but they were putting chemicals in that made the drinks taste metallic and sometimes salty. And so I said, I think they've got invisibility. And so I started barricading the door, and that didn't help. Um,
Do you think
and
that they were like breaking in, like in I guess being cloaked, or do you think
well,
they just walked in with you, like when you entered and exited?
well, I was living in this condo. I was moving like every year.
Okay.
And so at the time I was living in this condo, and it was a second story condo. And after I rented it, I found out that the condo below me was for sale. It had been for sale for like 6 months. Nobody had bought it. But then after like a month or so, maybe 6 weeks, somebody bought the condo below me and they moved in. And it was clear that they were goons. They were hired goons. They they were students, they were really young. They were
Yeah.
like 18, 19. But this is what I heard. I heard they were students. The parents bought it for them, but I never saw them go to school. They stayed in that place, and they smoked marijuana like every day. They just had parties. And I could hear them attacking me. They had this thing that would send a shockwave up through the floor and just go boom. It was some sort of attack. I didn't know what it was doing, but if I was sitting in a chair, it almost like the floor created a bubble, and it would lift me up in the air. And sometimes they would cheer, "Yay! We got him!"
What?
and
So was it like a
yeah,
giant bass hit or something like that, or was it something more advanced?
I
Because
don't know, but I
you're
get
saying a bubble, and to me
it was
that
like a pressure.
okay,
But these things would happen to me, everywhere I stayed. And if somebody, sometimes their neighbor would be recruited adjacent to me, on the side, and they would pound the wall. They would send like these shock waves through the wall. And if they were below me, they would drop things like right over my head. I'd get these boom. And I had one guy who was above me. He would go for like 8 hours a day. Like for 4 hours straight, he would be thumping, pounding right on top of me. And then he'd take maybe a 2 hour break, and then he'd go for 2 more hours. Boom, 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 boom. And then he'd take maybe an hour break, and then he'd go for 2 more hours. So he spent like 8 hours of just pounding on top of me. He did this every day. Um, and it everywhere I lived, those things happened to me. Um,
When
but
you,
then,
sorry,
yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
when you moved, would there be a delay? Like they had to catch up with you, or was it almost immediate
No, it
every
was
time?
right away. They
Okay,
already had it set up. They already had the neighbors recruited the day I moved in.
good Lord.
Yeah. And this happened over and over and over. And my family could see it. They could hear it. They could see that these stompings would follow me around the apartment. Um, so I don't know. I just thought it was some kind of energy attack. But at that one apartment where those students were living, they started gassing my apartment with this stuff that irritated my eyes. It would burn them. So I started wearing goggles, and like swimming goggles, and
Okay.
that would work for a couple days. But then they started putting the gas inside the goggles, in just in the space between the goggles and my eyes. It would just build up so that it would get so bad I'd have to take the goggles off because it was worse with the goggles on. So, and then I realized, yeah, they've got invisibility. I mean, how can they do that? They must be right next to me. Um,
Did anything else happen? Like, so I've heard similar stories like this of either government or the way that it was mentioned to me before was extraterrestrial, but of some other being in somebody's house that was cloaked or invisible. And a lot of the things that they said, like I mean, you're saying that they're putting gas or chemicals on your stuff. Did you ever experience anything that you would consider, even if you don't believe in ghosts, but like paranormal activity that, you think could be attributed to an invisible person being there, a cloaked person, things getting knocked over, things being moved in front of you, something like that?
yeah, I did have something. Yeah, normally they're really good about not making mistakes. This technology they've got, they're on me all the time. They're right next to me all the time. But the thing is, it never glitches. You know what I mean? It's like they never pop in then pop out. They don't make a lot of mistakes. I guess they don't make any mistakes. But one time I was standing with my son in that same apartment, and I had this tower of drawers, this plastic tower, and on the top of the tower, I had a file box, and it's been there for I don't know 2 months, and it's kind of blocking the door. I just never bothered moving it, and we were standing about 10 feet away. We couldn't see it because it was around the corner, but we heard this thud really loud, and we were like, "What was that?" And we just walked a few steps, and we saw this thing had fallen over, and nothing happened. There was no way that thing could have fallen over. And I put it back and I tested it. I wobbled the tower, and there's no way it could have fallen off. It was very stable. Um, so I don't know if that was a mistake they made. They ran into it accidentally, or they did it intentionally just to freak me out. I don't know.
They
But that
did.
was the only time that I saw like a poltergeist type of activity. That was the only time, I believe. Yeah. But there have been other times where I would get these same apartment. A lot of things happened in this apartment, same apartment. I would be sitting in the living room on the couch, And from the kitchen, I would hear this electric spark. And so I thought, oh, that's unusual. It's pretty loud, like this little, like a electric snap. And so I had this big piece of cardboard with foil on it. And so I put the cardboard in that, to block where that snap came from and where I was sitting. And then a few minutes later, I heard the snap again, but it moved. It moved to the dining room. So, to avoid the cardboard and the foil. And so I did it again. And once again, it moved. And then like the next day, I was on the couch and I started to nod off. I was watching TV. And just before I could fall asleep, this big electronic spark went off right in front of my head, like an inch from my face,
Good
between
Lord.
my eyes. It was really loud. And that woke me up instantly. Um, so there's some sort of invisible entity that's doing these things. So what I did, once I knew they had invisibility, I took this really long stick and I went around, waving it in the air and poking it at the ceiling and in the corners. And I thought, well, maybe are they floating up in the air? Why can't I touch them? And I didn't hit anything. Uh, so I said, wow, I know they're here, but I can't touch them. So they've got this invisibility that's untouchable. And I said, how can that be? That's, normally when you watch a science show or whatever, and they talk about invisibility, they always talk about bending light to go around the object to make it appear invisible. But the object is still there. But in this case, it's like it's there and it's not there at the same time. So I didn't know how they were doing it. And I thought to myself, what, there isn't even a theory for this. And I thought, but that's strange. I thought there's usually a theory for everything. Um, so so I spent the next 2 years like Googling CIA invisibility, government invisibility, and I would get nothing, not a thing. Um, and then I was on Twitter and I tweeted to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I said, how does the government's invisibility work? I know it's not light based. And then he didn't respond back, but I think maybe, I don't know, a month later, 6 weeks later, I was watching YouTube and I saw this video that popped up in my queue, and it was about the fourth dimension and invisibility. So it appears that if you could travel in this fourth dimension, you could be invisible to somebody, to a normal person. So like we live in the 3D world.
Yeah.
We have three dimensions. We have width, length, and height. But if there's a fourth dimension, that means there's another direction that we can't move in. But if they could move in this direction, they would exit the 3D world and they would enter a 4D world. But they would still have all the 3D capabilities. They could move around. It's almost like they're in a parallel world that, and they can move with the 3D world, but they're just outside it. It's like they're a submarine. It's like the 3D world is the surface of the ocean, and they're like a submarine just beneath the surface, and they can scoot around and they can pop up anywhere they want into the 3D world. That's what I got from the video. And I said, yeah, that's got to be it. That's the only thing that makes sense. And that explains how they can enter my apartment. They can, come right through the walls. Walls can't stop them, because if I can't touch them, I figure the walls can't touch them either. So they can go right through walls. And so that's got to be it.
Wow.
And also at the time they're putting chemicals in my eyes, chemicals in my mouth, even when my mouth was closed and my eyes were closed. So they can, like I said, they can do things. They can pop into the 3D world anywhere they want. They could probably, remove your heart without cutting you open. So yeah, I thought that was strange that they have that invisibility, but nobody ever talks about it. Why doesn't anybody talk about it? And that makes you wonder, well, why don't we hear about it? I mean, scientists like to tell us amazing things. Why don't they tell us about this one?
Feeling like Black Hawk helicopters are circling just a little too close? Slap on this "I don't trust the government" shirt and let them know that you're watching them watching you. Get yours now before they shut us down. Go to theothersidezero.myspreadshop.com. I'm poor. Please buy these.
I mean, they're trying to tell us that, we might be living in the Matrix. I've heard that. I've seen videos where scientists come on and say, oh, this reality we're in might be constructed. It might be artificial, run by AI. They seriously entertain these ideas. But they also have this many worlds theory where there's every decision you make creates an alternate universe. So all these alternate universes are created. So there could be another you who's president of the United States and married to a supermodel, in an alternate universe. They'll tell you that, which sounds like complete nonsense, but they won't talk about there being a fourth dimension and, a place where you can hide.
Yeah,
so what I did was
they're using it.
Yeah, and they can use it. Yeah, they can enter it. So I realized, I said, well, that's it. They're in the fourth dimension. And I just kind of threw up my hands. Oh, well, I guess I got to deal with it. What can I do? I'm not a super scientist and I don't know anything about the fourth dimension. How can I fight them? So I kind of I accepted it. I didn't think about it much because I didn't think there was anything I can do about it. And I thought it was just, beyond my pay grade. So I just kind of left it alone. I knew they were doing, I knew that's what they were doing, but I just thought I was outmatched. So, but then one day, I think this might have been around, I don't know, 2018. I don't know. But I was just thinking, well, why does the universe have this restricted area that I can't go to? It doesn't really make sense. And then I was thinking, well, I think everything has a restricted area, right? Every object does. Like a clock has gears on the inside, and you're not supposed to mess with them. If you want to use the clock, everything is on the outside. You can read the time, you can set the clock, change the batteries if you want. Everything like that is accessible, but they don't really want you going in and playing with the gears because you might break the clock or you might hurt yourself. You might get your finger stuck in something. So I realized, yeah, everything is like that. So then I guess the universe is like that as well. If you go out into outer space where there's nothing, absolutely nothing, it's empty, completely empty. But if you put a planet there, the space changes, it creates gravity. So now all of a sudden you have gravity where you didn't before. And then you remove the planet and the gravity's gone. So the space changes, it reacts to the planet by creating gravity. So that means the space has properties or characteristics. So that makes it a thing or an object, right? It's not nothing, it's something. And then that goes back to, the inner workings theory. If it's an object, then it's got inner workings. So the 3D space, the space that you can wave your hands through, has an interior. It has an inside. And that's where the inner workings are. And then I was thinking, well, what are the inner workings? Oh, it's what creates gravity. It's the fabric of space. It's the stuff that gets distorted. The fabric of space gets distorted by heavy objects, and that's what creates gravity. So I said, oh, all that makes sense. But still, like, nobody talks about it. Why don't I hear this from other scientists? And I think it's because they just don't want you to think that our government can have that kind of power. They want to avoid this fourth dimension talk because they don't want you to think that your government can have agents hiding in this fourth dimension and just fly right into your house, microwave you, put chemicals in your food. So then you wouldn't think you were free.
Yeah.
And that would, it'd be interesting to think what would happen to our society if people found this out. Well, what would they do? Would they head for the hills? Would they stop working? I don't know. Would they stop voting? I don't know.
Have you tried to reach out to any other like scientists or researchers besides?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I've been busy emailing like scientific magazines other physicists, and like I said, other podcasts and newspapers, and but nobody wants to deal with it. And but I am hearing people talk about interdimensional spacecraft and stuff like that, and and I think that's because of what I've been doing. I've been trying to reach out to people and tell them about this fourth dimension and interdimensional technology. Because before I started doing that, the only time I ever heard about the only time I ever heard somebody say interdimensional was Alex Jones talking about interdimensional beings. And I think he's kind of talking about demons and things like that. Because I don't think there's anybody living in this extra dimension. I don't think it's a place where you can live, but you can enter it temporarily and do things and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I don't believe they're interdimensional beings. I think they can enter this higher dimension and it gives them superpowers. They can and I think that's also how they travel to other star systems. They use the fourth dimension. Once they're there, that's where the fabric of space is, so they can manipulate the fabric of space and use that to propel themselves to another star system. And in this 3D world that we're in, you're not allowed to go faster than the speed of light. But if you're in the 4D world, it probably doesn't have that restriction. It's a different world. So if it's different worlds, it's got different rules. And we don't know what those rules are, but maybe one of them isn't that you can't break the speed of light. And another advantage to traveling in the 4D world is there wouldn't be any space debris to run into. Because if you run into a little piece of space debris, it can do serious damage because if you're going, especially if you're going really, really fast. So in the fourth dimension, it won't have any of that. But another thing, when it comes to interstellar travel in higher dimension, is that Star Wars proposed that. When they talk about hyperspace,
Yeah.
when they enter hyperspace, they're actually entering a higher dimension, and that's how they go to other star systems. So, but still, even after Star Wars, which is probably the biggest science fiction movie of all time, scientists still don't want to talk about entering higher dimensions, and they try to avoid all that talk, and especially UFOs. I think that's why they don't want to talk about UFOs, because if UFOs have been here, then their technology has been here, and if their technology has been here, then maybe our government has that technology. So there's yeah, a lot. They just avoid this whole topic, and it's really strange. But it's I go into more detail on my website. It's chemspray.weebly.com. So chemspray.weebly.com. And yeah, I explain the fourth dimension a lot better on there, and I have a lot of pictures and things like that. So yeah, so if there is this 4D world, there's this higher dimension. So the only way to get to it is you have to move there. If you want to go somewhere, you have to move there. And so the three dimensions won't get you there. So there has to be another one. There has to be a fourth dimension. And I think it's an inward direction. It goes inside. And that makes sense because that's where the inner workings are of the universe. It hides our inner workings. So it makes sense that it's an inward direction.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you have any type of idea or even a hypothesis of why our government or these invisible goons or whatever label you want to give them, why they're going to different star systems? Is there manipulation there affecting us in this universe?
I don't know. I just assume that they can do that because when I get in my car and I'm driving 80 miles an hour down the highway. They're right there with me. I don't see them. I don't know if they're in a craft, but they're right there with me. And they're like a lot of the main attack they use on me now is nanobots. And these are microscopic machines. And these nanobots, these particular nanobots that they use, emit their own microwaves. So, before they'd fire microwave guns at me. And so I would shield them. I would put, foil on my head. I'd wear a lead vest and things like that. But if they're putting nanobots right on your skin, then it's way harder to shield. You can't shield it because it's right on your scalp. They put them on my liver. They put them on my genitals. They do all that kind of stuff. Put them on my toes, my feet. But yeah. So um,
Were you able to
yeah,
figure out it was nanobots because you couldn't shield it
I
like with the guns?
can't. Yeah, I
Okay.
can't see them. I can't see them. I can't feel them, but I can rinse them off. Like they'll put them on my head, and if I stick my head under the sink, I can wash them off. And other things I do, I use wet paper towels on my head, and I'll use plastic wrap, things like that. Sometimes magnets can disable them. That's all you can do. You can't remove them. I mean, unless you want to rinse your head all the time. You can't leave your head in a bucket of water.
Yeah.
But uh, you can find ways to disable them, or just sometimes I use oil on my skin so they just kind of get stuck in it and they can't penetrate. Or I'll combine oil with plastic wrap, and that works really good. So yeah, that's the majority of my attacks now. It's nanobots. Yeah, they're really bad. And that's another reason why I know they've got invisibility because they can put them on me anytime they want. And so they put them on me while I'm driving in the car. And so I figure they must have some craft and they can follow me 80 miles an hour down the highway. So, why can't they just stay in that craft and go to the moon in it?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know how fast they can go in it, but seems like they got all they need just to use that. They could at least go to the moon, right?
Yeah, if they can keep up with you on the highway, I think, and you cannot see them, I think they could probably do a lot more than we could possibly imagine.
Yeah, what else can they do, right? So maybe they do have craft that can take them to other star systems. And a lot of people, when I tell them that we have this technology, they don't want to believe it. They want to believe that, oh no, it's not here. That's thousands of years in the future. Aliens are thousands of years ahead of us. And we could have gotten this from alien technology. A lot of people have that theory. Oh, we're backward engineering these alien craft that have crashed on our planet, and it could be. But I think it's also believable that we could have developed this technology ourselves. I think we're at the right timeline to have this technology. I mean, we have trillions and trillions of dollars that we can spend on this type of research. So it could be that we were just one breakthrough away.
Yeah,
Once we break through and find a way to enter that fourth dimension, that could be all it takes. And once you've done that, it just opens up a whole new world of science to you. The same way that the microscope changed science. Once somebody invented the microscope, things just took off. You get you'll get rapid advancements. They'll be doing this, then they'll be doing that, and then this. We've moved so quickly just in the last 100 years. It's unbelievable. And so who's to say that we don't have this technology now? Maybe this is the right time to have it. Maybe we don't need to reverse engineer alien craft. We can develop it ourselves.
yeah.
So I think that's quite possible.
I'd agree with you. There's the way I see it is like a lot of the UFO sightings in the 80s and 90s. They're all triangle shaped spacecraft, like the Phoenix Lights. Everybody freaked out over it. It all came out that was, I think it was the B-2 stealth bomber that they were flying around the deserts to test out. I'm not saying all of them were that, but it was government technology that couldn't be tracked by radar because the way it was made and everything like that. So we went from people thinking our airplanes were UFOs for almost 40 years ago. What could we
Yeah.
have now?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, when they use this technology on me, I never see it glitch. It's foolproof and it must be cheap. It must be easy to do. If they're using it on me, it's got to be easy to do. It's got to be relatively inexpensive and it's foolproof. So, I mean, they've got it perfected, whatever it is. Uh, and then another thing, I'm in this apartment building. It's got 3 floors, and we're on the second floor. And whenever somebody moves out above me, I've got invisible people up there. Like the invisible goons will move in. And I never hear footsteps up there. But if I go into a room, I'll hear them setting down equipment. I just hear this like gentle thud, or sometimes it's a tick, above me. But I never hear footsteps. But one time I got up out of bed in the middle of the night and I heard somebody, because they have hard floors up there. They don't have carpet in the living room. And I was sleeping in the living room
Okay.
and I heard somebody get up off the floor. I could hear their legs sliding out from underneath them and then them standing up. Um, and then another time I was sitting in the living room watching TV and just like 2 feet away from me, I heard it sounded like two people were wrestling right above my head. And I walked to the window thinking, oh, maybe maintenance is up there, and they drive around these little golf carts. So I was going to look out the window, see if I could see their golf cart. But instead, I saw one of the ladies from the office who works in the office walking toward our building. And so what I think was happening was they were cleaning up their equipment. They were the equipment they were using to microwave me. They were picking it up and zapping themselves out of there. They're popping out.
Yeah.
Because in case she would go into that apartment. Because what happened was somebody on the first floor, their water heater broke. So that's why she was coming. So it was an unexpected visit from the office. And so when the people saw that, they weren't sure what was happening. And so they had to get rid of their equipment. And there's nobody in that apartment. And later I talked to her. I said, did you go up there? And she said, no, I never went up there. And there isn't supposed to be anybody up there. But it definitely sounded like two people wrestling. That's how it's been going.
You're making me rethink so many things right now because, I, I'm a teacher. One of the things I do is I run a paranormal club at my school. So like all of all the kids, all of their parents, I'm the weird guy. So they come up to me and they tell me all these stories. And a lot of the things that they're saying are ghosts are things that you're saying right now.
I know. Is it ghosts or is it the government? I mean, what's more plausible? Like I said, these people are everywhere. They've got a secret army all across the country. And I don't know what it's for, but yeah, if you do see something strange happening in your house or whatever, it could be the government. But people will never think that. They'll always rationalize it away. Oh no, that's whatever. Something just happened, or that's a ghost, or that was the cat ran by and I didn't see it. People they'll never want to think it's the government doing something.
Yeah,
But
I'd
that's more
agree.
plausible.
Um, so it's gonna be asked. I've seen the answer on your website, so don't think I'm asking to make you feel bad. Um, People are gonna hear your story, and however they feel about it, at the end of the day, they're gonna say, why are they going after you? You made an EPA report, and now this has been going
Right.
on for you said 16 years. Why do you think that they're still sending,
Hmm.
their resources at you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe, well, partly, this is infrastructure that they want. Like I said, they've got this goon army all across the country, and it's got to do something. I mean, maybe it's just training. Maybe this is just good training for their goon squads. Or it it could be like some sort of experiment project. Maybe I'm a good test subject. Because it does seem like I'm being experimented on. It seems like they're trying new things on me, and then they want to see how I react to them. Because they'll give me a new nanobot. They'll use a new nanobot on me, and then I've got to find a way to counteract it. And so I think maybe that's what they want. They want to see what my response is, and then I'll find a countermeasure that'll help me deal with it. And then a few days after that, they'll come up with something new. So it's like, okay, you did that. Now we'll do this. And so it could be there's it's some kind of study. It could be that they're experimenting me on me. Um, and they don't like me, so I'm a good test subject. So, and then another thing is, they've got the money for it. I mean, if somebody, all it takes is you making somebody angry. If you make somebody angry that's high up enough in the government, they can just do whatever they want to you. There's no limit. They can stay on you for 20 years or whatever. And it doesn't matter how much it costs because they got tons of money. And like I said, every
Yeah.
department in the government always seems to want to get bigger. They want to hire more people. They want to promote the people within. Um, they're always trying to grow their departments and get more money. And so that's part of it. It's just a way to spend money. Um, and they want that goon squad to be there when they need it. So they want to give it stuff to do, and it keeps them trained. Like I said. But yeah, that's another thing, and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around. Like, why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. But that's the thing about the government. The government never makes sense. It always does things that are illogical.
That kind of makes you sound pretty badass, even though this is the most horrific thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, I am so sorry you're going through this, but you are combating them.
Oh yeah, it's okay. So they have to do it to somebody. That's well, maybe if they do it to me, they won't do it to somebody else. I don't know. They got to do it to somebody. That's the thing. So yeah, it's just life. It's just one of those things. Yeah, maybe they're perfecting their techniques on me before they use them on somebody else. I don't know, but um, yeah, the thing is, it never lets up. It always gets worse, and it just you're always thinking, what's next? Okay, they did this and they did that. What's next? And it's always something worse. It's like if they wanted to, they could probably turn me into a
Yeah.
charcoal briquette in 5 minutes, if they wanted to. So there's no limit to what they can do. And the only reason I'm here, it seems like I'm here at their mercy. You know, they could do whatever they want to me, um, but they're not done yet. Yeah, maybe I'm like an asset to them because they've already started. But it seemed like when they first started going after me, that they thought, oh well, they probably got approval for it because they say, oh, we'll just spray this guy. He doesn't like chemicals. We'll just spray him, make him kill himself. And I fought back, and they said, oh, we're going to need some more money. We need to go after him this way. I just kept building. They, and it's almost like they're making work for themselves. You know, they're they're making they're coming up with reasons to make this project bigger. I said, oh, now we got to microwave them. And oh, and the thing is, yeah, when they microwaved me, that was somebody else who targeted me. Somebody, some big shot saw my bumper sticker on my car, and then he put a call into somebody and say, "Hey, we got to do something about this guy." So it's like, so that's twice
This
I
just
got
sounds like
targeted.
the most horrific version of government work. They just keep adding on more and more things to pay more people to do less and less work.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, in America, nobody's supposed to get targeted, right? We all believe that the government doesn't target
Well,
anybody,
do
but
you
I got
think the
targeted
nanobots
twice.
are like a third form of it or just an upgraded?
Uh, yeah, they're an upgrade because I don't think they microwaved me for maybe without the nanobots for maybe 2 years, 2 or 3, and then they started using nanobots on me. And yeah, that's been the last upgrade. And but lately they've been putting nanobots in my ears, and I guess that's a good way to get at the brain. They put them in my inner ear. First, they were putting in my ear canal, and so then I was taking plastic wrap and putting it over my ear, and then poking it into my ear canal, and that would kind of keep the nanobots out. Um, but now they put them in deeper, and I think they're even, I believe they're putting them in my inner ear. I don't know, or right on my eardrums, but they just go right into my brain, and sometimes I can feel my brain just fusing, um, and condensing, and it feels like I
Sure.
suffer brain
Uh,
damage. But yeah, that's their latest technique, just microwaving my brain through my ears, and it makes them ring. That's the thing you notice at first. And they started doing it actually maybe 5 years ago, and I noticed the ringing, but I thought they were doing ear attacks. I thought it was, oh, they're just going after my hearing, but no, they're going after the brain. Um, See, that's pretty brutal, and it's hard to sleep. I'm trying to sleep, and it's like, ring. My ears are ringing, and I can feel it in my. It's not just the ringing. The ringing's not what's bad. It's you can feel it in your brain, and yeah, that's really brutal. Uh, and yeah, I really don't.
when you say you feel it, when you feel it in your brain, um, is it like like a migraine or like a headache or is it? You said fusing, but I'm a
No,
little.
it's yeah, it's like you've got it's like if you got two microwave guns pointed at each ear, and they're firing into your ears, and they meet in the middle, and your brain just condenses. It contracts, hardens up. Um, you lose brain cells, and I try to like shake my head, and I strain to try to force blood back into that area, and I'll use hot water bottles on my head and stuff like that. Yeah,
Good
it's really
lord.
bad. On my liver, they'll attack my liver with nanobots, and it bubbles and gurgles, and I'll get pain. Um, and it seems to cause numbness. Like I'm getting a lot of numbness in my body, and I think that's from the liver attacks.
How have like doctors responded to this? Like if you're getting cooked from the inside, there's got to be something that shows up from that.
No, they can't see anything. Because a lot of the attacks they just mimic aging. Like they've been hitting my eyes. They were putting chemicals in my eyes recently. I guess what happened is they're microwaving my liver, and it's affecting my circulation. And then my eyes went numb. Like I can't, if I touch my eyes, I can't really feel anything. And so then when that happened, then they started putting chemicals in my eyes that make my eyes shrink. And when that they started doing that, they did that very aggressively, and I started losing my vision. My vision started getting dimmer. So after a couple days, my vision got about 20% dimmer. And I went to the eye doctor and they said my eyes were fine. You know, they couldn't see anything. Um, and I guess it's just not something they check for. See, they know what doctors check for and they know what they can do that won't be seen. And a lot of it just mimics aging. Um, like my liver, they can't find anything with my liver, even though they microwaved it like crazy. I can't even drink because it feels bad. My body can't handle alcohol because my liver's so weak, and and just the brain. You know, I'm becoming forgetful. I have trouble speaking. I couldn't can't speak as well as I used to, and I'm having a lot of memory loss. And that's just another thing. It's just the doctors usually chalk that up to aging. So it's like it prematurely ages you. And my joints are bad. They hurt, and it's not something they can see. It's I know this is like nothing anybody's ever heard before. Nobody even talks about it. And yeah, and I can't make this up. I mean, there's no way. If you go on my website, you've been on my website, but if other people go on my website, you can see that there's no way I could make this up or put this type of energy into something that isn't real. Some all this time and energy I put into this website. I mean, there's no way I would do
Yeah.
that if it weren't
Um,
real. Um,
so the doctors can't do anything, and you're dealing with the physical effects of these phantom attacks because you don't see the people. How you know you're it sounds like you're. I mean, you're presenting this in like kind of a chipper way, and this is horrific. How has this affected you like
yeah,
emotionally and socially, as well as like your family because they're going through this with you as
well,
well.
yeah, yeah. Socially, you can't really have friends because nobody can understand it. You know what I mean? And you kind of isolate yourself. You don't visit some of your other relatives because they can't understand what you're going through. Um, and then also you don't know who you can trust, you know, because they can recruit people instantly. You could even have a friend and then and they could recruit them uh, in just a matter of weeks. It doesn't take long. So you end up isolating yourself. But my family's been supportive. They hang in there. They don't know what they can do, but they believe me. And like I said, when I get attacked from neighbors, they can
Yeah.
see it, they can hear it, and they can see it, and sometimes they can smell the chemicals. So they believe me, and that's I've heard other people say when they get targeted, their family won't believe them. So at least I'm lucky that they believe me. I think even the doctor, I have a psychologist I go to just to vent, just to get out and talk about it. And I would say she believes me too. Because like I said, there's no way you can make this up. And I only see her like every like 2.5 months. But every time I see her, I've always got something new to say. Oh, now they're doing this. It never changes. It never stops. It always escalates. And so yeah, her mind's blown. Just every time I visit her, I just her mind gets blown. And she'll tell me that. It just blows my mind. And reading your mind, that's another thing. That's the first thing that I noticed they could do was read my mind. And and that blew me away. When I found out they could read my
So
mind, that really blew me
how did you
away.
figure that out?
But now that I think about it, that's the easiest thing they can do, right? Because everybody's mind emits brain waves and they just pick them up. But yeah, I was trying to sleep
Okay.
And this is back when they were spraying me chemicals.
So this was at like the very beginning, like 2008, 2010.
Yeah, this was like no, this was like 2013 maybe. And I was in my room sleeping and they were spraying me. And so I started thinking about sex. And as soon as I did that, the spraying stopped. And I thought, oh, it stopped. Is that because I was thinking about sex? So then I stopped thinking about it and thought about something else, and the spraying came back. And so I did that. I thought about sex again. It stopped. So I did that like 6 times. And every time I did it, it changed. I could start and stop the spraying just by what I thought about. So I knew they were reading my mind. Because once I started thinking about sex, they started focusing on my thoughts and stopped spraying. So, and then later, they would stop spraying me when I was eating dinner. And I thought, well, maybe they're trying to taste the food, they want to focus on my dinner. So yeah, that's another thing they can do, read minds. And now that I think about it, now that I know all the other stuff they can do, that's probably the easiest thing they can do. But that was the first thing I realized, and it
That's
just blew me
wild.
away.
Holy crap.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, if I'm in, and I try to stay on second floor apartments because if I go to a third floor or if there's an attic above me, there's people in the attic. They're up there. And a few times I've heard them. One time I was in this third floor apartment and we had an attic above us and I heard something fall. I heard like something that weighed about a pound. I heard it fall maybe 3 feet and hit something. And then right after I heard that, it was pretty loud. Right after I heard that, I heard somebody talking up there, and then that was it. But I don't know who they were talking to. Maybe there's another person up there, but you never hear anybody walking around. So that they're doing some kind of floating or something. I don't know, but they were definitely up there. I could hear them talking. And then another time, I was in the kitchen, same apartment, and I could hear somebody turning a screw right above me. And so I mean, I could point to it. I knew exactly where it was coming from. So for like a minute or not, maybe 35 seconds or 45 seconds, I could hear somebody turning a screw. I could hear it squeaking, the squeaking noise. And and then I heard them drop the screwdriver. And then I heard them fumbling around and shifting. I heard them shifting their weight on the beams. And I heard them pick up the screwdriver. And then I heard them going back to twisting the screw. And that was right above my head. I mean, I could point to it. And so I don't know what they were doing.
Maybe.
Installing equipment, maybe.
Um, so you've heard them, you've possibly seen them knock stuff over. Have you ever seen one of these people or seen somebody that felt out of place during one of these attacks or something like that? Like a person you could look at and be like, hey, they're probably associated with this other than like the like your friends or people that were like, recruited or paid off.
Recruited, yeah. Um, Not really. I mean, sometimes I could see the cars that were spraying me. Like like I said, I'd go 45 miles an hour on the highway, and then somebody would catch up to me and they'd get in front of me, and then they'd start matching my speed at 45. And so I knew they were spraying. And one time somebody did that, and I said, well, I thought to myself, I'm just going to catch up to them. And so I caught up to them, got their license plate number, and passed them, and the spraying went away. So, I mean, they were spraying me. So I think that's the only time I see them is when they're in cars spraying me. But they don't do that a lot anymore. Now it's mostly microwaves. And if I am sprayed, a lot of times now they can put the chemicals right in the car. They don't have to spray the roads. Um, they're gassing me right in the car. And sometimes they're putting, like when I'm sleeping, they're putting fumes right under my nose. So so I usually have to block my nose
Good
with like a
lord.
pillow or something like that. Um, yeah, they're just on me. Just it's so intense.
Holy crap. This is
Um, and now and now at our apartment, there's this van that's parked outside in the parking lot, and it's been there for I don't know, like 2 years, and it never moves. And it's got shades, it's got tinted windows, and it's got these louvered blinds over covering all the windows. And I think I think it's just storage. Like when they pop out, if they're staying in the apartment above us,
yeah.
they got invisible goons staying in the apartment above us. I think they need a place to pop out to, and I think they pop out to the van. It's just always there and
Have
it
you ever
never
seen
moves.
anybody uh get
I don't
in and
know.
out of it? Or
I saw one person go up to it and they're in my building, but I'm not sure which apartment they're in. They're not adjacent to me or underneath me. Um, but I don't know. It's just strange that there would be a
yeah,
van there and that never
especially at an
moves.
apartment. They typically chase, campers away,
Yeah, and you know
or
what?
van life people.
Yeah, right. And that van appeared. Remember, I was talking about those two
Yeah.
people sound like two people wrestling right above my head, and they had to get their equipment out. That's when they. That's when the van showed up. It showed up like maybe 2 or 3 weeks after that incident. So maybe they realized, oh, we got to be able to, get equipment out of here and take it someplace safe. So that's when the van showed up. Oh, so yeah, this it's pretty unbelievable. But and thanks for
Yeah, this
allowing
is
me to tell my story.
one of the I'm not saying you're crazy by me saying this. I just I'm a redneck and I don't know how to say things well. This is one of the wildest and craziest things I've ever heard. But you've been documenting this since 2008. You've nobody is gonna make shit up for 16 years. It
No, I don't think
if you
so.
were, you're the most committed person on earth.
I mean, and the thing is, I couldn't make it up if I tried. I mean, nobody else has done it. I mean, where are you going to find, you could search and search and search, and where are you going to find a story like this? I mean, it's just you couldn't make it up if you tried. I mean, somebody would have. If you can make it up, somebody already would have. And another thing, I'm like, I guess it started about 5 years ago, but I started getting heavily censored on like Twitter. A lot of my posts, if I post about the government or invisibility, nobody sees it. It just gets buried. And if especially on YouTube, if I say anything like that, nobody sees my comments. I'll comment on a video and talk about government invisibility, and my comment is still there. I can see it, but it never gets any likes. And if I log in under a different account and go
Huh.
look at those comments, it's not there. You can't see it. So I'm heavily censored on social media, and my website, it doesn't you can't it's hard to search on Google. It's very hard. You have to find it in a roundabout way. Maybe you have to put in my name and then go to another social media site and then find your way to my website. But it used to be there. I used to be able to type in things and in Google, and my website would come up like on the first or second page, but now it doesn't. And even if you type in chem spray, you get all this other stuff. You get all these you get all these companies that are called Chemspray, and then you get and they'll show up like multiple times on the same page, and that didn't happen before. I don't know if they created these companies just to bury my content, because that's one way they censor you. They just try to bury you. They 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 come up with other nonsense that people have to wade through, and they'll never get to your stuff. That's what they do on Twitter. On Twitter, you got to go through all these clicks. Like they'll bury my tweets in like used to be used to be they called it like I don't know what they
Shadow
called it,
banned.
but now it's like possible spam. And I think some tweets just yeah, it's like I'm shadow banned. Yeah, but it depends on what I tweet. Like I can tweet something, a normal tweet and it's there. But if I tweet about the government or invisibility or chemical spraying, that kind of stuff, it nobody sees it. And then sometimes I'll get likes from a lot of bots, you know. Uh, like one time I tweeted in this post done by this economist, and and I got all these like housewives liking my tweet, and it's like, why are these? I got I got like 10 likes from housewives, and so why are housewives posting, or why are they looking at this economist? It didn't make any sense. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of censoring going on, and you just don't realize
No,
it.
I've heard similar things from a few other people that that some of them they've had social media presence for 10 plus years on a website and thousands if not millions of followers, and as soon as they start talking about you know anything with the government or just things that are out of the norm, I guess they get thousands of views per post to like 12. So I don't something's
Yeah,
getting kicked in there
right.
to shut that down.
Yeah, I'll always get like, right, if I do a tweet that they seem to censor, I'll get like 6 or 7 views. It's always like 6 or 7. It's really weird. Um, and I'll never get a like, just 6 or 7 views. So something's going on.
But besides everything you've said, like this is wild. But like, what would be your message that you're trying to get out past the void to the people?
Oh boy. Um, hmm. Well, just be um, be leery of the government. Um, People like to think that the government is like an individual. It's, like if an individual does things wrong, they, they might go broke or they might end up in jail. Or if a business does things wrong, they'll go out of business. But a government doesn't have to do that. They don't have to act responsibly, and uh, and they seem to just do whatever they can get away with. And the media is always on their side. To me, the media and the government are synonymous. Um, the media seems to protect the government, and so so just realize that how much power they have. Um, and just to think for yourselves, and don't trust what the media is telling you. Um, it's been my experience that almost everything they say is not real. It's not true, and they're lies just made to manipulate us. Um, but people like to find comfort in these lies, and I think it's always best to know the truth, even though the lies are comforting. I think you're better off knowing what you're up against.
Um,
Um,
I don't know what is
like
going on
when,
currently. But as soon as you started talking about like what you wanted people to know that couldn't, not censored, you would fade in and out. It was like somebody had, I mean, it's still kind of like that
Oh,
right now.
really?
Like somebody has a dial and they're turning it up and down on you. I don't know any other way to explain it.
Uh-oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not doing anything. Um, yeah, just realize that they can do what they want. The media protects them. Ooh, yeah. Sorry, I'm struggling because they microwave me so much. I it's hard to hold my thoughts together. Um, so yeah, I would just encourage people to visit my website. Uh, it's a real eye opener. It's chemspray.weebly.com. And everything I try to keep to the nitty gritty. I don't extrapolate too much. I don't go on rants. I just present the evidence as I see it. And there's a lot of pictures on there and diagrams and things like that. I have some video evidence. I have evidence of our old house getting sprayed with the chemicals. And it's a weird thing because I set up a camera,
Yeah.
like a security camera on the porch because I wanted to catch the people spraying me. I thought, oh, I'd see people right with sprayers out there at night, but instead I just got the spray. I didn't think I was going to catch the spray because I never see it in the daytime, but it was showing up on this infrared camera. You can see all these this mist, and so the first time I saw it, I had it hooked up to a TV inside the house, and I was watching it, and it just looked torrential, right? It just looked like a storm was out there. I said, "Oh my God, look at that!" And I ran outside to the back door to look outside. It only took me 3 seconds to get out there, and I couldn't see anything. It's quiet, and I said, "Where'd it go?" And I ran back into the room where the TV was, and it was just raging. And I did that a couple times, and you just couldn't see it. And I said, there's no way that they are stopping and starting it in the 3 seconds that it takes me to get outside. So it doesn't, you can't see it at night, but on an infrared camera, you could see it. And there was one time I was outside and I was on the street and I could feel the chemicals coming straight down the street at night. I couldn't see them, but I walked toward the chemicals and I could feel this stream. It's like I was in this raging river of chemicals, and I could feel these droplets hitting my body. And as soon as they hit my body, they would burst and evaporate. But it was so dense, these droplets, it was like I was
Holy
getting
crap.
hit with a fire hose. And these it was as soon as they hit, they would burst, and I could feel the wetness of it, but then it would just go away. So I was completely dry. I could feel the bursting droplets and the moisture that was released, but it would just vanish. And that's how volatile these chemicals are. And I'd estimate I was maybe 20 feet away from the sprayers, but I couldn't see anything. There was nothing there. They were coming straight down the road, and there was nothing in the road. So they must have had invisible people just standing right in the road spraying me. And I could smell them. It was like I was in a river, and I could smell the chemicals and I could feel them, but I was completely dry.
Especially, you could smell it, you can sense it, you
Yes.
can't see it, but then you can see it on camera and it's just flooding. I've seen the video on your website. It's couldn't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when they were spraying me in the street, I couldn't see it. But I know if I had an infrared camera there, it would show up like crazy. But I couldn't see a
You
thing.
need like an EMF detector for when the nanobots get activated, just to see if like you can hold it up to where you think they are and if it'll go off.
I've tried that. I bought something that detects EMF, and it just doesn't work. I think I think you need like heavy duty equipment. I spent maybe 150 on this thing, but the really good ones cost like 2 grand, and I
I
just don't have
feel
that
you.
kind of money. um, yeah, I don't know how you would detect these nanobots, because I don't think the microwaves are strong, but I think the power of the nanobots is they're so close, and they can penetrate your skin. And so they go inside you and then they start microwaving you from within. I think that's their real power. But yeah, they're strong.
I don't know.
I don't know how they
That
do it.
that's you're about to send me down a rabbit hole tonight. I'm not sleeping. I'm just gonna be looking up stuff and trying to research. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you feel is very important that needs to get out that we've not gone over yet?
Well, I don't like to talk about it, but my son did die like 3 years ago, and usually I try to avoid talking about it. But I'm convinced it was them that did it. It was the government, and he just got a weird illness that doctors couldn't figure out, and it seemed to come about by eating food, and it would just make him crazy. When it started by him eating, and then he would develop this psychosis. But then after a while, it would go away. But but then when he'd eat again, it'd come back. And then the next day, he had it all the time. We couldn't get rid of it, and doctors didn't know what was going on, and he would be revved up. He couldn't even sleep. And I know the government was doing that to him, because they do it to me. They rev you up like you've had 10 cups of coffee, and they do it with microwaves. I don't know how, but they send a microwave into your upper chest, and it just revs you up, and you have a really tough time sleeping. And one time we were both in the living room watching TV, and it's like he couldn't sleep, I couldn't sleep, and then all of a sudden the microwaving stopped, and we both got really tired. We both started yawning, and I felt like I was going to fall asleep, and he looked like he was going to fall asleep, and it probably lasted, I don't know, less than a minute. And then they turned it back on, and we were just lit us right back up, both of us at the same time. And so they did that to him all the time, and he had to be on tranquilizers to get any amount of sleep. And sometimes he would, just by entering the apartment, his symptoms would go through the roof, just walking in the front door instantly. And so I was convinced it was the government. Um, and then sometimes if guests would come over, they would leave him alone. But then when the guests leave, he'd get revved up again. And we did everything we could. We were taking him to doctors, but then it just got too much for him, and he ended up committing suicide. Um, I was just hoping for a miracle. There was nothing we could do. And later, I mean, just before he died, we bought a breathalyzer, and we figured out that he had auto brewery syndrome. It's where your body takes carbohydrates and it makes alcohol. And he just had it worse than anybody. And I think it was something they were doing to him, because normally you don't become psychotic from that. And um, yeah, there was just nothing we could do. Uh, so yeah, I don't like talking about that, but that's another thing they did. And I think they did it because he has autism, and I would take care of him. I drive him to work, and you know, help him with some other things, but I think he was sort of an obstacle to my targeting because, uh, maybe people wouldn't feel so good about targeting me if I was taking care of him. So I think they brought in like a heavy hitter and and got rid of him, took him out, and uh, so yeah, I don't really like
Holy
talking
shit.
about it, but that's another thing they
Yeah.
did. Uh,
It everything we've gone through has been awful. Like the people doing this stuff are, horrible, cruel people. And then to get to that, it's, you know,
yeah.
a step above all of it. I I'm sorry that you've gone through all this.
Mhm. Yeah, they just what it comes down to is they do anything as long as they think they can get away with it. And what helps them get away with it is that people never believe it. People think, "Oh, our government doesn't do that." Why would they go to that kind of trouble? But it's not trouble. This is what they do. This is what they want to do. Um, these are powerful people that like wielding power, so they can
Yeah.
do almost anything.
You've just heard Ken Roylance's story, one filled with surveillance, secrecy, and a battle for the truth that most people wouldn't believe until it happens to them. Whether you think this is government tech, alien interference, or something even stranger, one thing is for sure: something is happening in the shadows. If you want to go deeper, visit Ken's website at kimspray.weebly.com and support the show by grabbing the new Paranoid Patriot tee, and the links for both of those are in the description down below. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next drop from the other side. Until next time, stay safe, stay skeptical, and always be watching, because they might be watching you. Thank you all.